Before we start, I will remind council that this portion of the meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube. I will also remind council to speak clearly and project their voice when they are talking so people viewing at home can hear. I will now do a roll call of council for the benefit of the public watching this meeting. When I call your name, please wave at your camera and say here or present. I'm Councillor Redekop, and I'm present and chairing the meeting. Mayor Shawn?
I'm here.
All right.
Councillor Martin? Present. Councillor McMillan?
Present.
Councillor Merlehan?
Present.
Councillor Shantz?
Present.
Thank you. So the first thing on our agenda is disclosures of pecuniary interest. Do any members of council have any declarations of pecuniary interest this evening? Mayor Shantz?
I do number 8.1, the removal of the holding provision is a job that Brian's been working on.
Okay, thank you. So second thing on our agenda is sorry,
Patrick's.
oh, Patrick, sorry. What's yours? Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, through you, Chair Redekop. I have a pecuniary interest on 8.1 as well, the removal of the holding provision. Brian L. Shantz, the planner, is a client. Also on 8.2, the public washrooms discussion for the St. Jacobs BIA. The St. Jacobs BIA is a client.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't catch that right away. Okay. Seeing no other pecuniary interest. Number 2 on your agenda is GIS training session for council. The training presentation by the manager of planning. Jeremy Vink is here this evening to provide council with a presentation. Mr. Vink, you may begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council. So about 2 weeks ago, council asked for a bit of a demonstration and understanding of GIS, and in part to understand where we're going with the proposed position that's on the budget for tonight. So I'm going to take control here and put you through a lovely, exciting evening about GIS. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. So there you go. So I'm not sure if that's better or not. So anyway, so just gonna try correct this for a second. Just gonna switch screens because it's flipping to my other screen here. Just a second. Okay, so I'm gonna go through two parts tonight. The first part is going to be just on what is GIS, how we use it, what we can do, where things are going in terms of the software itself, and then take a break for a few seconds, let anybody ask questions about that portion. And then I'm going to go into the last section, which is the last few slides, just about where we were heading and what our thoughts were around the whole position that's proposed tonight. Obviously, you're going to be discussing that later. I'm just giving you background on that so that when you get into the discussion later on, you can be fully informed. So what is GIS? GIS is a short form. It stands for Geographical Information Systems. Basically, it's a computer system for gathering, mapping, managing, analyzing, displaying data relative to the Earth's position. So information based on geography. It's science related, it allows for analysis, and it's very visual using maps and 3Ds, etc. Its unique capabilities let you dig deeper into the data that you have to reveal patterns, relationships, or just information. So GIS is built on data. So there's different types of data. Basically, it's either, for our purposes, for the mapping purposes, either it's a point, it's a line, or a polygon, and there are layers of data that we use to build a map. So there's often many different layers open on our screen when we're working with it, but it has information in behind it. So I'm going to demonstrate that a little bit later, what that looks like and how that works. It also allows us to do analysis. So when I'm talking analysis, I'm just going to switch show you, for example, I just got to pull the right one here. I got multiple screens open tonight to show you everything. So this is Elmira, for example. If you're looking at it and you would just be saying, it's going to refresh here for a second. Those green little dots scattered around Elmira obviously are parks, and I'm just showing you those are parks. And you may say, that's great, they're parks. That doesn't tell me much. Just tell me there's a park over there. What use is that? Okay, I want more information. What if you wanted to know more about what kind of park that was? So we could break that down visually to say, for example, you know, the dark green is the WMC, which is the arena. These smaller, lighter green ones are neighborhood parks with playgrounds. Obviously, Lions Park and some of these other parks are bigger and they have different elements of features to them. And then we get, say, like Park Manor that has no, it just is our sports fields. And then the red ones are passive features. That's, you know, space that is green that we don't actively have anything on, for example, maybe beyond trails. So now we started to break it down. We always started to visualize and change things, right? So giving more information is being valuable. But if I wanted to change that up, even again, to say, well, under our official plan, the township has requirements that you should walk no more than 400 meters to walk to a park with a playground. So if I look at the parks with the playgrounds, the other parks are still there. I'm just ignoring them because they don't have playgrounds, but the ones with playgrounds, I draw a 400-meter buffer. And the computer does that for me. Boom. And now shows me a major change here. So, you know, these bigger parks that are a little more substantial, the community parks, those are 400 meters around them. These ones here show 400 meters. Start to see some overlap on the west end of town, start to see some stuff, you know, here. But the east end of town is obviously underserviced if you looked at that. So you would see, okay, that's information. Good to know. Maybe that's useful in the parks master plan when we're looking at it, right? We can do sort of analysis and change these things up. What if we change that and suddenly said, let's do 800 meters? Wow, you know, suddenly everything overlaps and it's, you're like, wow, there's everything, you know, all the parks overlap. So 800 meters, we're definitely servicing everything almost in the town, at least in the residential area. But if I take those maps, for example, and I wanted to change that a little bit and say, let's just do the neighborhood parks. Let's forget the bigger parks like Bullander and Kate's Cause and Lions Park. Let's just focus on these small green ones. We start to see even here, you know, there's a lot of overlap at 800 meters. They're all completely overlapping each other. So you start to do things with mapping, and you can do that and change the numbers up and change everything up. But that allows you to start doing analysis. So that's an example of some very basic analysis of how things could work. We do much more, you can do much more analysis and many things. Depends on your question, depends what you're trying to accomplish. So what else do we do with GIS? GIS helps us to build applications. They're apps. They're simplified things. I say Google-ish because people understand Google, but because Google is easy to use. You build applications from all this busy data that you could have in behind it. You build simplified applications and deploy it out to people, whether it's the public, whether it's internal to our staff or to a specified group of people. It can be on our phones, tablets, browsers, desktops, whichever way you want to do it, we can push it out. And product we use with ArcGIS, which is an Esri-based product, allows us to do that actually fairly efficiently, considering what you think it might take, which is beneficial because then you spend your time making good data on the back end first, then push things out. But it's very technical. When I showed you the screen, there's a lot of tools and analysis tools that can work with it. As you start to edit and change and delete things, it is you get very complicated. So it's not a simple program. It's not like using Word or Excel. It is actually, there is coding in behind it. You can do coding with it to do better analysis. It is going beyond. It is almost like creating Word or Excel for someone to use. That's essentially what it is. If you're using GIS and you're pushing it out, we're creating almost a Word platform for like a general Word user who wants to type up a letter, right? Think of it that way. So we're the back end. That's how it works. We get things going on the back end to push it out to the user to make it simple. So how is the township using GIS? GIS is run and operated by the planning section, and everything is basically completed by me for the most part. There isn't a backup. We don't have anyone who's trained to run the program beyond me really at this point in time. We've tried it because it's so complex and they don't use it regularly. It's too hard. We tried different methods, obviously, but it didn't stick and didn't work. Each department does have a person that is able to do some basic mapping, and that's required because I can't do everybody's basic mapping. So they are able to create their own map and do some basic elements, but they do come to me to do the more detailed stuff, or to explain or help or do the other things. It started in the late 90s that we started using GIS. It was only in the planning department initially. That's why it's resided in planning, but it's continued to grow across the municipality. So since then, demands have increased for every department. They want more and more data has been created and produced. So we used to deal with about 3 layers of, well, I shouldn't say, maybe 5 to 10 layers of data. It was the parcel fabric, address fabric, and roads were the main ones. And since then, that's kept changing. And we now probably, I think, sitting on our GIS server, have about a few hundred layers of data, okay? They come from different sources. Either we create them and generate them so we can better utilize things, or they come from the region, for example, or they come from the province. So we utilize data from different sources because they're the authoritative source for that, and then we just download it and utilize it. But we have a significant amount of our own data that we maintain and build just to keep things functional. So some of that data is updated and changed monthly. So each month, the region sends us the monthly updates on the parcel fabric and the road fabric. So there's about 5 layers of data they ship to us every month. They send out that we download. Annually, we do update our GIS layers from the GRCA or any other agency, from the province, etc. We go through and update those to keep them up to date. And we do have to quarterly do updates of our own data. So we do have some data that staff is working on and that's being updated and tweaked. And then every quarterly, I push that out to everybody else. So it's not shared all the time. But that's what kind of the process. So we got different data in different places to be updated and moving forward. So in 2020, there was about 25 special requests for information and data assistance that somebody had to come to me to do. And that means, say for our drainage consultants or another consultant will be like, here's the project area. I need all the landowners. I need that set of data. I need the imagery. I need this, I need this, I need this to do our work. So we've hired the drainage consultant to do some of these drainage projects. They need the data from me to do their work. If not, they can't get some of that work done, and would it cost more for our drainage consultants to do the work and cost us more ultimately as a municipality. Same for some of our engineering projects. The engineering firm will say, okay, we're doing the road work here. I need you to download all this data for me so we can get access to it, so we can work with it to do the road work, what we're proposing to do. So that's cutting, clipping, and maintaining data and shipping it over. For example, some departments are asking me to build specialized maps or do some analysis. So they say, can you do this for me? So that often happens too. So that's all the specialized requests. Those can vary in timing from a day to 20 minutes. If a simple one, it could be 20 minutes, but it could be a day of time to produce and crunch out a bunch of things to somebody to get it out to them, depending what they're asking for and what they're needing. In addition, I have to set up the accounts. So every GIS account, when somebody starts or leaves, I have to set up the accounts for them or manage those accounts. So delete them if they leave, troubleshoot any issues people have with the GIS program, as well as train them how to use the GIS program. So I have to go through and I do some basic training with staff that need to learn it. So bare minimum is probably about an hour. Those who do a little more work, I'm probably spending 2 hours of time, more likely. And then it's constantly just anywhere along the lines, troubleshooting with them as things come up. So the GIS data we have, because the way our program works, it is very centralized. The repository is a great location to distribute data out from. So the GIS we have is connected to other software the township owns. So there's a distinct connection between our GIS mapping and the citywide mapping, which is used for asset management. So all the mapping and the asset management comes straight from our GIS. There's a push out there and there's a connection. There's also connection to City View, which is our building permit program. So they have a connection to the mapping. If my mapping goes down, the City View has issues and the building inspectors have a problem. Then they have challenges doing their task. We also have a connection with the automated vehicle location system, which tracks our snowplows. So it's based off our GIS system. So we are able to track our snowplows and speeds, and we set up the routes on the GIS system and feed it into the what we call the AVL. So this program is connected to these various other programs. So if it goes down, obviously there's implications to these other departments or using these other programs. Like I said, there's hundreds of layers of data, provincial, regional, and township, which are regularly updated. And then the data is shared via the servers to the desktop and to, so it's a complex system, so I can explain this. So it's shared there's desktop software, there's internal web, which is a link on people's web pages internally to staff that they can get to a quick map of the township stuff. And then for those who are not in the building or directly connected to the server here, there is actually a web portals process or web portal, which we call ArcGIS Online, which gives them access in the field. So we're dealing with three independent sections that are all fed from our central source. Just going to give you opening this one section up here, which want to show you our data layers. It just takes a moment to open my data here. So I'm just going to do this. This is our file server storage. It's called the ArcVector server. It is a separate server. Yes, it's because of the amount of data. So here's the layers of data we have built into this that are in our system that we have access to. So it's alphabetical at the moment. So you're seeing everything from GRCA layers to our official plan layers to information around our parks, information regarding the region of Waterloo that they give to us, including the regional official plan layers to allow us to do look at things. Various road layers, there's our sanitaries, different sanitary and storm layers involved, sidewalk layers, signs, billboards, stormwater management, trails system, our entire trail system for the township. We have Union Gas shares information with us, so we have Union Gas information available. They give us that annually also. Water meters, water billing, water mains, Water North Hydro shares street light information with us. And then we have our zoning information. So therein where I said we have hundreds of layers of data, this is the hundreds of layers of data that are in the system that we generally share out of the server. And like I mentioned, it's a bit complex, it's a centralized software and all departments use it and depend on it. Here's a sort of a diagram that our IT staff put together to try to explain this one point to somebody on our staff who was asking a question. So it's not a simple thing, I guess, but here we go. On this one side is kind of inputs. So we have data coming from different locations. So infrastructure is doing updates that are coming from the CAD system, and we bring it into GIS to centralize it because CAD doesn't have the data behind it. It just does line work, for example. The region of Waterloo gives us those updates and we pull the data from them. We get some updates from different sources such as public works staff. We feed it all into this server. That's the ArcVector server that I just showed you. There is another server called Grissom, which allows us to push things out to the web page for staff internally as well. Then there's the Galaxy server, which is, yes, the third server, which is our imagery server. That's where we store all the imagery. That's the data, that's the air photo that we get. So the region works with us every 2 years to get that. So every 2 years we pay the region a little bit of money, nowhere near the amount we would actually be required to pay if we had tried to acquire it ourselves. So there's a bonus there that we work together with the region and other agencies to get the imagery at a reduced rate for everybody at a better price. Then we get the clients who consume it. That's staff, whether at their desktop, web, or ArcGIS Online, which is just off the web externally. And then this Nautilus server is where we're pushing things out to hosting things. And then So there's a whole lot of things going on here. So we're pushing things in and out, moving things around. So it's not the most simplified server. And don't ask me to get technical on any of that. I have to defer to Barry, because Barry and I have to work closely together on the IT side and planning side as how this works to make sure we're doing things and not causing problems. And sometimes we're both troubleshooting the problem. So what do we use it for today? Just before I jump into that, I just want to show you kind of how we work with it today. In general. So here's an example. So in general, at our desktops, planning and other departments often have this open all day long. So when someone calls and asks a question, we're actually going to literally pull up the property right in front of us. We are literally going to go to that individualized property and we're going to take a look at what the person's talking about, because they're probably going to start talking to us about, and especially in our department, planning questions about what's my zoning, what can I do on my property? I want to put a shed in the back, or I want to put in a pool, or what's the distance can I do that? Or even from the building permit side, often, we get drawings using our GIS imagery so they can plop the building on, and they use that to submit for their building permit. Say, here's where I want to put the building. It helps us on, even the tax department can pull this up and they can look at things and they can respond to people quickly. Historically, actually, we wouldn't have done this. Back in the 1990s, we would have said, hey, I'll call you back, because I was going to go and walk to look for a property file. We would have went and looked for these big maps that we had on a desk and checked the parcel assessment map. And we would have called them back a few hours later or a day later once we had the information. We have gained efficiency. This program makes things much more efficient, so it is saving staff time by doing that. So we can now, like I said, look at things. So along the side, we have multiple layers of data. So I can turn on the imagery so I can take a look what someone's talking about. So they can start saying, hey, I want to put the pool in my backyard over here. How far off to my property lines do I need to be? For example, we could talk to them about that. If somebody did have another question also, they could say, oh, can I sever my property? So what we would do is take a look. Now I'm in the middle of res law, so obviously severances are pretty minimal and not likely going to happen. But I can turn on, to help give myself some understanding, is all the utilities. So that's our utilities. That's our water, our sanitary, and our storm. So I can turn them on as best I can, and I can look at them and say, oh, is there services to this site? Yes or no? Okay, what's the zoning to the site? I can turn on the zoning quickly. And I can say, here's the zoning. Okay, what's the information? I can click on this property. It's going to give me information. So it just pulls up this little dialog box. It tells me there's site-specific zoning. It tells me it's in the R5A zone. I could click on this link right here, and it's going to take me to the PDF zone, zoning information on our map. And it'll pull it up on the screen if I needed it to. It also gives me the roll number if I needed that. I'm not going to click on that because that provides personal information, but it gives me information right away that I can then use. Okay, and then because I can look at the R5A zone right away in my zoning bylaw, I could tell them, oh, does it work? Are you able to do any severances? I can measure a property. I can measure how wide it is. I can measure the area of the property, so I can do a quick calculation to make sure it meets lot area or anything like that. And it will tell me this information. I can then converse with the individual as they're talking to me and get all this to them immediately. It also, like I said, is visual to help anybody. So it's not just planning, but engineering, for example. They may not care as much about the zoning, but even fire or engineering is going to want to know what the little red dot here is, the fire hydrant. So they want to know this is fire hydrant H-7. It was installed in 2008. So this is some of our asset management information. The more we put in, the better information we get. So right now, there's only some information. The more we can add to it, the better information we can provide or deal with or do analysis on. Here again is a water main. So it tells me this is the water main running from here to here. It's a PVC pipe. It's a 300 millimeter diameter. It tells me the asset ID number. So I got a bunch of information automatically. So engineering can look at that quickly and say, oh, this is what we have for services. And they can take a look at all those services they need. Even if somebody is calling up and let's say they're calling our engineering services counter and saying, look, I got a problem. the street lights out on my street, or I went for a walk and I was down the street and around the corner and the street lights out and it's dark at night. Can you get it fixed? So our engineering staff can say, okay, so when you said around the corner, which street are you on? And where are you talking about? And then they can actually identify that this street light, eventually they could click to it to figure out it's this street light. And they could look at this and now say that's a decorative high pressure sodium light. So sometimes the decorative lights are different and have to be handled differently, and they go to a different department to handle the replacement than Water to North Hydro. But right now we know it's a high pressure sodium, that's the illumination and quick contact. So now they can help and they can identify and say specifically, and they can send that off to Water to North Hydro if need be to say, this street light here is out in front of this property, this location. So it makes us more efficient, for example. So that's what we do day in, day out. We actually have this open regularly. As I mentioned, even finance to help people look at their property and determine assessment information. This is some of the stuff we collected last year on our Parks and Recreation Department, for example. So there's analysis on even, what's on each of our parks, for example. So I just clicked on a fence. It's a metal fence. It's about 1.2 meters in height. Was the considered condition was deemed fair. It was the ball diamond with the plastic top. So automatically we have information, right? So, and we need all that information for our asset management, because now I can analyze how many meters of fence we have if we needed to. I could try number crunch. If we had to replace all that fence in how many years, we could start to do some number crunching. Doesn't happen immediately, but it gives us time and opportunity to do that. Nobody's asked me to do that, and please don't ask me to do that because it would take me a long time to do, but it's something we could get into doing, and that's what the benefit of GIS is. And that's why municipalities are building their systems on the GIS. They need to do asset management and do a bunch of this work because it allows us to be efficient, A, in servicing our customers as well as internally as well as externally, but also allows us to do more analysis with information and do it better. And that's where the asset management comes in. Whether you're a build engineering, parks, finance, just understanding where that asset is in that park. We can tie a picture to it if need be. So I could go out and take a picture of the park or the bench, and I could tie it to that GIS system so that I could click on it and somebody could be in there and click on it and say, this bench, now I want to see what the picture of that bench looks like. You could go that far. Some places are just so they can actually see what that looks like, or go to that level of detail to take a picture of the playground. So when they open the playground picture, they go, I want to see that playground so I know, oh yeah, that's the slide that we're going to replace. I need this. It would make staff even more efficient if they're trying to remember what they need to take to the field if they're looking for information. So we input our water meters as we issue them. So building department issues water meters. We input them in the system. So engineering knows they've been issued. We know the size of them. Then it's also available for our water billing side to understand that we issued that meter to that property. So the utilities, as I showed you, are on the system. The benefit is our GIS, because it can be out deployed in the field, is our staff now on the public works side are able to carry these tough books. The water department has them. It's a small laptop, which is built to be rugged, allows them to open that same system out in the field and allows them to look where the water and the sanitary and the storm are. So they are more efficient. Otherwise, they would have to go get a call and they'd say, okay, you're in Breslau, go look at this property. They have a problem. Take a look, and you'll be looking for the services, but then you can't find them. And then you have to drive all the way back to Elmira to find the paper drawing, to drive back out. That's inefficient. Now they got some of this data right in the field at their hands. They don't have to drive 20 minutes and search for a piece of paper necessarily. The more we can put to it, the better we can make their life too, because there's more stuff we can provide them to make it more efficient. We get road collision data from the region. Well, we do get road collision data. So we have information that we can historically then look at road collisions on up and down any different road in the township. Then that's based on the incident information collected by police department. So that allows us to do analysis that way. Some of the information we have is road signs. So the visibility analysis is done every few years. So we have that tracked. So in the GIS system, we have every single road sign, and we know where it is and what it's supposed to look like, and if there's any needs to replace it. That feeds then into our asset management citywide system that allows them to track for maintenance purposes The citywide has a work order program in it. That's what they use to do work order requests. So they can say, yes, we changed the sign. Here's where the sign is, for example. Street lighting, like I mentioned, we have the street lighting in there. So it allows staff to pull it up in the office, investigate if there's any issues. Is there different distances to that, maybe gaps that are between street lights? Are they too far apart or anything along those lines? They can do some analysis over here as well as in the field if they need to. Sidewalk inventory. So every year we're required to go out and do a sidewalk inventory to inspect our sidewalks. Our engineering technician goes out and walks every single sidewalk. He used to walk out with a clipboard, and he used to make a lovely little sheet of paper and make an X and make notes on his clipboard and walk around and then come back in and he'd type all that stuff back into an Excel spreadsheet. And then he tried to do some number crunching on that to pull together the sidewalk tenders. Now he walks around with his smartphone, stands exactly on the spot where the issue is, clicks on his phone, inputs the information right there, which is pretty much minimal that he has to input. He actually just types in a few things as a drop-down menu, and he continues on his way. He comes back to the office, I download it, and he runs analysis as he needs to. No more retyping, no more like, where was I when I mentioned that the crack was from here to here, or was it there? Was that in front of this house or that house? He's standing right on it, and the analysis is right to that point. So it's much more efficient for even him to do those kind of works at this point in time. And it's much more efficient that he can then put this map out to as part of the tender work to say, hey, here's where all the issues are. The person doing the work now can see them all and knows that I can go from A to B to C to D fairly quickly without having to jump all around. He sees the map. He or she sees the map to follow the repairs. As I mentioned, we do drainage mapping. So that's for the different drainage works that we have. So we have that all tracked and mapped. Also allows us to be careful now that we know where the drains are, municipal drains are. We often have distances around those drains where you don't want people to dig, so we can kind of show that on a map too and say we don't want you to do anything within a certain distance of that municipal drain. Our trail mapping book was produced through using our GIS and is also on our township web page. We push that out to the public. I'm just gonna give me a second. I gotta show you that quickly. So on our township web page, under township services, there's a page called maps. We do push some maps out to the public to make things easier so they can look at some interactive zoning maps. So they can look at their zoning of their property. A lot of real estate agents are doing that right now and they love it because they can just find the zoning without having to call us. They can pull that up as they need to. We have the trails mapping. So somebody can go looking for the trails here and they can print the trail map as need be. So whether it's the actual, they can click on this and open the map. We also built this one. It's called a story map and it's just one method of deploying information, but basically it just took everything from the book and kind of pushed it to the web page a little bit and we created it. So this, I can go to the Avon map. It tells me a little bit about the Avon Trail. And then I can go look at the Avon map and zoom in, zoom out and take a look and like, oh, I can start here and then that's what it's going to look like. And I can go here, or maybe I want to do the Kissing Bridge Trail. Oh, that's the length of it. That's here and there. Okay, now, so as an individual, as a public, you can go searching and do your own little look where you want to do for some trails. And this is all put out for the public customer service. And then people can utilize this to kind of know what to look for. And they can go for further information to the Kissing Bridge Trailway, for example, and learn more there on their webpage. But those are things we kind of produce there. So we share that out, some of this out to the public, and that's an application. That's like I mentioned, remember how we said we do apps? That's pushing out so people can use it. So part of our greening projects, last year we started with a tree inventory. So Parks and Recreation started doing tree inventory. So to collect the tree inventory, we started using a program in the GIS system. They borrowed it from Center Wellington, who was using a similar program, using the program. We just got the program from them. So now we're running it on our own. So they go out and collect tree inventory information. So they're doing it on an iPad. So they're out in the field collecting information about street trees, pruning, what tree pruning they've been doing, or any hazard trees they have that need to be removed. And then they're using that to push that out to get work done. So get rid of the hazard trees. These are the trees we need to get cut this year. tree inventory. So then we're starting to collect the trees across the township, obviously, especially starting in Elmira for which trees are in which streets, is now also then shared with the University of Toronto. So every year we download whatever we've collected for 2020 and share that with the University of Toronto, who then does analysis with other municipalities that they're getting information from, and they use that for research and inventory information. So we're sharing with others. And that's part of what GIS is meant to do also, is data sharing. Fire department, we do response areas. So we map the response areas for the fire department. We've done some road closure maps, so they will come when the roads are closed in the summertime. The department chief will likely, the hall chief will come and say, can I have a map, because we now have to cover Floridale's road over here. Can we have a large map printed as well as some small ones, so we understand what areas we're now covering, which we don't usually cover, and we need to understand this area. So they'll ask me for maps. Number of years ago, we helped the fire department get their fire tanker shuttle certification, which means we had to do analysis on how far it was for the fire trucks to get to the nearest, I think within 5 and 8 minute drive times from the fire hall. How far would that be? There is questions how far they would be from the nearest water sources, including hydrants and what other water sources. So there is analysis we had to do, a number of different analysis information we had to do to provide to fire underwriters to gain that analysis, so that we could do that tanker shuttle certain information to get that certification, which meant people's insurances could drop in the rural areas. And then we started moving into fire pre-plans. And we haven't got as far as we'd like the pre-plans, but that's just one thing we're trying to do is essentially in the fire trucks, the fire department has a bunch of binders. As far as I know, there's a lot of them, because they tell me there's a big bunch of binders in each of the fire trucks, and it has a pre-plan for a property. It's all paper, and they put it in, and then they go through and then analyze, and they just say, you know, here's the contact information, here's maybe where hazardous and materials stored on the site, and here's where the shutoffs are. They have that all on pieces of paper. Well, if we move that electronically, they might be more efficient, but it also means if the updated one spot is updated once versus each fire truck having a different book, that needs to be updated every time you change a piece of paper. So imagine if each fire truck has a different book. You got 20 fire trucks and you're changing 20 pieces of paper every time that something changes. Bit of work, and it's not always up to date. We do work with emergency management staff here for floodplains and flood mapping. We do the snowplow tracking. We have the kennels, the bylaw enforcement we work with. They use the mapping. We use some of the information for economic development to list properties that are vacant and available for building, whether they're serviced or not. As I mentioned, we link to the building permit system. Zoning official plan maps are all done using the GIS system, and we are going to be doing the update to the zoning this year and the update to the official plan, which means brand new mapping, which means you have to remap everything this year. As well as we're looking to do the zoning bylaw and start on that this year and move into next year with that means a whole bunch of new mapping. So all that's done on the GIS. So we do all that online, also provide that online mapping for the community, as I mentioned, with the zoning and information. And we have to track growth for the way the province has structured things, greenfield versus infill. We track growth now, so we do that on the mapping system, tying with building permits. We also produce hard copy public road maps, which the public can get from us. And then, like I mentioned, that day-to-day customer service, where we're being much more efficient, that we're just able to answer questions right on the phone with them as we're pulling it up and talking to them, and not having to call them back a day or two later like we used to. And this just kind of shows you some of the layers that we just constantly updating, changing, or using. And then I'm the one doing the work, so then I'm the one pushing that back out to everybody. So where are we going? We only use a fraction of the capabilities right now, but we need to do more. We need to do more with the asset management. Obviously, engineering is asking for a little more of my time, and they have concerns that we won't have enough time in 2021. The province is always changing, so there's being more demands on the GIS side as part of some of the changes that are happening at the provincial level. NG 911, which is the new 911 compliance everybody across the country has to comply to, is based on GIS and GIS accuracy. So to be compliant, we have to make sure addressing is sent up to date weekly. not daily, almost daily to some extent. So that is pushed out almost quite regularly back out to the emergency services. And this is a requirement of the federal and provincial levels. We have to be compliant. So we in the region will need to be compliant with that. No choice, no option. It just helps us to be more efficient. Like I said, the more we can put into this, the more they can click the links and get right off the GIS system, the less people have to drive around, or the more they're going to have it at their fingertips to be able to deal with items. Technology is starting to change, so we're starting to see more of the 3D and the drones, and it's not just anybody who does just special areas that do 3D. Everybody's starting to get into it. So I can see that being a value, and that's starting to change in the next few years. Tied to this, tonight we are going to have these 2 RFPs in front of you for modernization. Part of this is to help clean up where we are today, because like we mentioned, I haven't been able to stay on top of things as well as we'd like to. So the RFPs will help do some cleanup to get us moving forward ahead and more efficiently to implement some of these items and just to do it better and to clean up the data errors that are taking place. And I'll go into more on the RFPs when we get to them later. So where could we go? Actually, as of last week, I got an email from Water North Hydro saying they want a meeting. They want to meet to discuss data sharing of GIS. So they want more information on trees, where trees are relative to their power lines, where information is. So I have a meeting this week with them to discuss how we can do data sharing, what data they'd be liking to share from us that we have that they could use. So they want information from us and they're willing to share information back as necessary. So already we're getting more and more requests. If we can integrate, we'd like to integrate this information with the census data, which is great for doing population demographic information. That would help us when we do the recreational facilities master plan, when we're doing some official plan work and zoning work. It can be helpful to do some analysis that way to understand what's going on in our community. Communities are supposed to be doing open data, which means you share certain levels of certain data. We aren't doing that at the moment, but a lot of layers, GIS would allow us to do this more efficiently. If we could get our data cleaned up and distributed, we could do that better and provide that open data. More apps for departments means they work better. Like I mentioned, like the fire trucks as an example, just, if they can get out to the field and they have this information on hand and they're able to access this fire pre-incident plan like this, they pull up to a property, they can click on this and find out the contact information. They can find out that's the main shutoff. They can know there's a roof solar system they have to shut off if there's a fire that's connected to electrical and they want to make sure they cut that off. There might be some hazardous materials, maybe some something stored there, that's chemicals. They would have that on hand, and it doesn't matter which truck pulls up and how as soon as it's updated by one person, it's shared with everybody and they could be more efficient and better access for everybody on hand, for example. So water modeling, to do better water modeling, we send people out to do pressure and do some of the fire under area stuff for the region for our water modeling at the moment. We might need to do some of that for our own asset management, so we'll need to look at our water modeling. For that means everything has to be integrated, and there's a system that's to get it all integrated between their valves, pipes, and etc. to get it integrated properly. Indoors, it's called ArcGIS Indoors. For example, you can distill assets down to an office, to a desktop, to find out even where electrical is. So the GIS can even show you floors of a building, and you can just go through floors and show walls, and you can get down to an asset and know that. And the desk is in this office with this phone, and this computer is in that office. You can get down to that in terms of asset management, or even to deploy someone to say, there's a repair, go to office X, and here's where it is, and you can give them the map and tell them where it is. Works better for bigger municipal places, but would work for us too. 3D infrastructure. This is my 3D infrastructure. So pretend we're more than 6 feet under. Sometimes we feel like we're buried 6 feet under, but this is probably about 12 feet under and you're looking up. So this is GIS taking things a step further. It's just as 3D. It's just showing your pipe systems. You got your catch basins and manholes that are shown. You even see the street light above the ground here. The gray is the road. So this is your 3D network. This is what GIS can do. So imagine engineering, you're doing a road project and they're trying to determine if somebody's wanting to connect a new municipal service to a water line. Engineering could take a look and make sure that if they want to run that service towards that house at a certain angle, they make sure it's not going to interconnect with a sanitary service or hit something else, or you can just understand where things are relative to each other. As you can see, this starts to get very complex because we're just talking water, storm, and sanitary, and as an example in here with streetlights. So it's not even all the services you could necessarily could expect. So this would give you a better understanding of what would happen 6 feet under. So we want to centralize. It's a central source, the GIS essential source. We can build dashboards for easy monitoring of information. I'm going to show you some of that in a bit. Improves workflows, integrates with the tax assessment, and we can do some analysis in that sense too. 3D modeling, I told you we can do some 3D stuff. I was going to demonstrate this one, but I don't think I will at this point. It just shows you that you can start showing buildings in a model, and then showing very simplistically buildings quickly, and then what they would look like if you change the zoning requirements, change the height, change the dimensions. What would that do for light impacts? It's being done very quickly and easily now, where before would be very hard. So if we could get into that analysis, for example, it might help doing things in Elmira as we intensify. Cemetery mapping, I'm just going to actually use Calgary as it. Well, I could use Hanover, but I'm going to use Calgary's because theirs was a little nicer. It's not letting me click. Okay, just a second here. So Calgary, for example, puts their cemeteries out. So you can search a cemetery, and you can go to that cemetery, and you can then start searching for a person. So people want to research their family history and find everything, or find a plot, they can start searching that. Hanover does the same thing. You can start searching Hanover's cemeteries. You can start putting your cemeteries up for what's lands, what's plots are for sale, what's accessible. So that's how people are doing it. What your needs are, you can start servicing your community. I'm going to use the city of Barrie here. I'm not going to go through all these. These are so where municipalities are starting to build some of this. Just trying to get them to work. There. Here's an example from the city of Barrie. So all they've done is, this is something they've created for their community. They thought it was useful. They have a little thing on the side that within 1 kilometer, what would be there. So if I click on a parcel, and it's going to give me everything within 1 kilometer. So it's going to tell me, oh, there's schools, which schools are in 1 kilometer, which parks are in 1 kilometer. Okay, what if I change that to 2 kilometers? You could change that. It can tell me when my yard waste pickup is for people in this area. So it's got all this information. They can just push that out because they found that valuable for their community. They have a lot of other information they push out. City of Guelph does a lot in that sense too. They've built a lot of apps for their community to build out. If I could get into one of them. Okay, I'll get Brampton's maybe. So Brampton's GeoHub. They call it GeoHub because that's what they put all their mapping applications. So they got apps, maps, and stories. They got the story maps, lots of them. They use that to keep people informed. So they got a parks and recreation locator. So you can click on that. You can go in and you can search a park. You can search, I want a playground and trails, and they'll search the parks that meet those requirements. You can search for a splash pad, and it'll search the parks that meet those requirements. They can search active planning applications. You can search where roadworks are taking place. You can search, similar to what I just showed you with Barrie, you could search what's happening in like things around your neighborhood in terms of like garbage collection, things along those lines. You can look at population. They put out things around natural heritage restoration and parks and construction works. They also go to this, putting out a dashboard, which is tied to their GIS information. So they punch out this based on this, like non-residential tax revenue that's been collected. So they put this information out because they have targets they're looking to meet and whether they're meeting them or not. And it's based on using GIS to pull this out. So they push this out to their community. So different things, different ways, different things you can do with it.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jeremy. That's very comprehensive reporting. I was wondering if the council has any questions about what you've reported so far.
Yep. If not, I can move on quickly to explain the GIS position that we were talking, that's going to be discussed tonight. So I'm going to give the background. You guys will be discussing this later, and I can answer any questions later too on this. But just going forward, most municipalities around 15,000, I seem to have some sort of GIS taking place for them in some form or fashion. Orangeville has stuff. Center Wellington, for example, has had it over 10 years in their planning side. They now have somebody on their infrastructure side too, so they have 2 people. Owen Sound does it. Collingwood, Saugeen Shores, which is your Port Elgin, they do have a GIS person. Saugeen Shores also hires summer students on top of that. North Dumfries recently posted and hired for a Planner 1 GIS technician, for example. So it's pretty commonplace to see GIS positions in municipalities. So it's not on that helped us build a scenario of what the job description would look like. There was a question of whether there is capacity in our infrastructure services department and asset management to do any of the GIS work. Just to be very clear, that position that was hired to do asset management was never intended to do this amount of GIS work. They are doing some stuff now, but if they have to continue to do the work or more, they're not going to be able to complete some of their very required asset management items. And because the software is very specialized in the GIS side, they're hesitant and very concerned about needing to do more on the GIS side. They're just not trained. So they would need much more training to be able to do more work in the GIS position. So we mentioned the need, reporting, asset management, mailing, even mailing information that we do, all our mailings, we use the GIS system to send out our mailings, basic customer service, but we need to maintain what is created. So it's one thing to create it, but you're always maintaining it and it's always being updated. And each layer, it takes time and effort to do all that maintenance. But it does give efficiency where it has saved staff time all the time for other sections, like I said, just being more efficient in answering phones or things like that. The current system isn't efficient. Having me do the work and part-time on the edge of my desk, sometimes coming in early in the morning to get it done, isn't working well, and it's not efficient to have a manager do a technician work. It doesn't really make good sense. And it's not being done well because there's errors that need to be fixed and I just don't have time to do it. It's adding pressure. So either I have to do planning or I have to do GIS. And if we have to do more GIS work, especially this coming year of asset management or anything along those lines, something on the planning side has to start to give, which the same would be for IS if they had to start doing more GIS work. If something's going to give that we can't accomplish something somewhere else. So we're going to be less efficient. And with all the things we've taken on over the years, planning is kind of stretched as thin as it is. So trying to add extra work to take on amount of time isn't easy. So the org review pointed out that, suggested, put in a placeholder, say contract, maybe $30,000. So what does $30,000 get us? Well, I used the RFPs that we got as a base, and I said, well, 30,000, what would that get me in terms of hours? Well, it would get me 240 to 300 hours, 6 to 8 weeks of work. Okay, that's what a consultant would give me. But I figured out my average. I work probably 5 to 10 hours a week. That's just averaging it out. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. So and you're getting between 250 to 500 hours of my manager's time right now. The org reviews, 300,000 wouldn't even cover what I'm already doing. So we're already getting more than just $30,000 of work done. So we need more than 30,000 there's more work to be done. So the contract alone at 30,000 wouldn't address the issue. It's not going to solve the problems. So we reviewed various options: students, contract, full-time, planning GIS technicians. We've looked at working with the cities and the regions, but each one of them would have had to hire a new person anyway just to help us. So what we propose, and this is, I want to make this very clear, is what's proposed is a 2-year contract position, okay? We haven't proposed it as full-time at this point of time. It is likely in 2 years we'll probably be saying full-time. We think it is a full-time position, but we right now know there's a lot of work to be done to catch up and clean up. So we want 2 years to get that done and reassess. So a 2 years contract position to do full-time GIS to do this work. There is even an opportunity that we could work with like Wellesley and offer some of our GIS services to them for, let's say, a day a week if we needed to or thought that was beneficial and we didn't have, we could stretch the person that far. So the best value for service, we figured, based on somebody that's skilled and trained to work in it, and to get the best bang out of our dollars worth, was a full-time position and a contract. The job description is based on other municipalities with a similar level, similar scenario. So it's not like we're recreating the wheel. As the position that would be used in many other municipalities. That's what we're using as the basis. And the proposed funding method is using development engineering revenue, building revenue, and water and wastewater reserves, which is not causing any impact on the tax levy whatsoever. So basically, so there's almost no impact on the regular tax levy is what we're proposing, how to fund this position, versus what was in the org review, which was suggesting the 30,000 that would have come from the general tax levy. So we've improved it that it isn't pulling off the general tax levy. We're going to have development pay for it. So that's what we're suggesting. That's how we got to this. It is the best solution to solve everything that's going on in front of us.
Thank you very much.
That's the end of it.
Mr. Vink. So we're going to go to DS 07, 2021, the GIS modernization for data. Mr. Vink, I think, has clarified why he thinks that we need this and how we're going to fund it. So are there any questions for Mr. Vink on the first GIS thing? Larry, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, and through you to Jeremy. Thanks for the presentation, very enlightening. I had no idea what GIS was capable of doing, and I think you just scratched the surface for us by the looks of it. My question is, when do we decide enough is enough information, and who makes that decision? Because this could be something that you could probably have a team of 10 people fill it in and gather information, and so who makes that decision, and when do we realize enough is enough? I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So through you, Councillor, through Mr. Chair, the Councillor Shantz. So right now, I guess enough is determined by myself and whatever director is making the request. So if a department wishes to create data, they have to make a request, and I would have to we would discuss the creation of the data and why. So we don't just generally willy-nilly create data. You have to understand how data works and what you're doing with it, and whether there is links to other data that needs to take place. So we do not let just anybody create data. So it's whether what do we need it for, how are we going to use it, and then how do we best collect the data. So there is a bunch of work that takes place, and it's done between the director who's seeing the need for something to take place and myself to have that conversation. And it would have been some demand that would have come up somewhere.
And if I could just have a follow-up. So these apps that you're producing, how long do they take to produce? And obviously it depends on how much detail has to be put into it, but on average, how long would an app take?
Some of the ones we can push out to the public, you're talking, you know, a little more complex. Like we're going to try to get some through some of the consultants here on one of the RFPs. But if the base data is there and ready to go, pushing out a simple map can take you half a day, less than half a day. Putting out some more complex items could take you maybe, let's say, a week. You know, let's say a week or two of time, sort of a scenario. So,
Councillor Merlehan.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair Redicop, to Mr. Vink. You talked about all these different levels of government providing new data, some on a weekly basis, some on an annual basis. This particular contract to clean up the data, how more clean can it get when we're looking at, you know, most of the levels of government providing that information? And I mean, I don't mean, you know, in Woolwich Township, making sure every fence post is, you know, identified on the GIS, but how, when you talk about the data not being clean, maybe you can give us an example of how what we're currently doing isn't isn't clean enough with the weekly updates and such.
Yes, through you, Councillor, to Councillor Merlehan. So when I say clean up the data, is to just, we're not going to clean up other agencies' data. We don't need to clean their data, it's cleaning our data. So we have a bunch of data, like I mentioned, our utilities, water and our sanitary, along those lines. So they're not networked. A truly networked connected system would say that the hydrant, if I turned it, literally in GIS, you could actually tell it to turn, and it would show you what would happen if you turned off a valve here and it turned off a water valve there, which properties would be turned off. If it's truly networked, it would connect the services to the mains, to the valves, to the hydrants. Ours isn't interconnected right now, and it should be. That would allow us to do the pressure monitoring and the flow monitoring, and then to do some elements. I can just show you one thing here again. It pains me to show this, to be honest. Hopefully you're seeing this. So see these lines, they're not, that there's an overshoot going on here. This is the lateral to the property, but it's going way past the main. So there's hundreds and thousands of those errors in the system. So they all have to be corrected. They should be properly connected. There should be, this line should literally snap to that line, and they should be connected to each other, that they would be understood between the system, the GIS system would understand they're interconnected. So you can imagine that to clean this up, it takes time, right? And then every time we input new data from a consultant, we have to go through an error correct, and we should be checking that. I don't have time to check that right now, and that's causing a problem. So here's a big gap. I noticed it tonight. I have laterals that are running from the sanitary, but there's no main in front of this property. The main's actually even missing. Errors we need to correct. We need time to do it. And it pains me to look at this, and it almost pains me to show it to you. That's the GIS side of me is actually just cringing right now, because I wish I could get it all fixed. So there's data like that where we want to improve it and just to make it run better. I myself am not a GIS expert. I do not have it. I've done it off the side of my desk. I have some basic training, but I am not a GIS technician. I'm not a certified GIS technician. You know, usually when you're doing this, you have a certified GIS technician to do the work and do it properly.
Thank you. Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Bing.
Fred, I have a procedural question.
Okay.
So Jeremy did the presentation, which was a separate entity.
Yeah.
And then we flipped over to DSO7, which is a separate entity, even though they're all connected by GIS. I wasn't sure if council was done asking questions about his presentation on GIS. I just don't want all these issues to get blended.
Okay.
And you can keep going. We don't have to flip over right at 7, but the delegations are ready to go when you want.
Okay. Yeah, so let's go back to what Val said. So are there any other questions or comments about Mr. Bink's earlier presentation on the general GIS component of the township? Councilor McMillan, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Redekop, through you. Mr. Bink, you talked about if people call in, they can get information right away. It's a better customer experience for our residents. It wouldn't be the GIS person taking those calls. Would those calls be directed to them? Or would it just be the fact that they're updating the information so that the person who handles the call can pull up the computer and have up-to-date, accurate information to whoever they're talking to right away?
Yes, through you to Councillor McMillan, yes. So it is not the GIS technician. So we deploy this out to people on their desktops to keep it simple. We got different ways they can work with it. So that's why I train staff. So there are staff trained to do basic opening and clicking and utilization of the data, and they would be answering the questions. So they don't create maps or anything. They just open the data. I create a map for them to use, and then they utilize it to answer people's questions, so that they are efficiently able to, then they have the right layers in front of them to open and look at. So if engineering staff are the ones looking at it, they have a slightly different structured product to work with than, say, planning, because engineering doesn't need the zoning side. I'm going to more focus on providing them layers of water, utility, and sanitary information than the zoning, for example. So I customize the information for the staff to be able to use it efficiently.
Thank you. And then, Chair Redekop, can I ask another one?
Sure.
This one, there might not be an answer. It might be impossible to answer. So if you can't, I apologize. What do you think the breakdown is for the departments, and how who benefits to what percentage in this position? You've talked a lot about planning and they would benefit obviously public works and the fire. Is this like 50% planning, 25% fire, 25% infrastructure, or is it like right across the board?
Good question. I'm not sure the exact percentage of heavy users. Infrastructure is probably one of the heaviest users, as well as planning. Okay. Parks and Recreation is starting to get into it, but they do utilize it regularly. They even for grass mowing locations and contracts, things like that. So not as much on the Parks and Recreation. Fire does use it heavily, emergency management for different things. Finance to some extent, it depends on the position in finance, but I know their tax billing side, they're dealing with the public and helping them. They do have it running on their screens and use it regularly. So everybody just has it open all day long.
Infrastructure, public works heavy right now,
Yeah,
and then
heavy.
kind of
Yeah.
the field is wide open as far as we can go with this, but those three right now.
Yeah, so those three right now, and then like I said, a lot of people just have it open all day long just to have it handy. So it's there whether they use it for 5 minutes or 5 hours. So
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Merlehan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Redekop. Through you to Mr. Vink. Earlier in your presentation, you talked about in 2020 that you had 25 requests for services for, creating a map or something. And you said those requests took anywhere from 20 minutes to sometimes a day, I think is what I wrote down. When I hear that, it doesn't, I'm trying to hear how that's a full-time job. And then right now we have before us 2 RFPs for companies to clear up the data and things like that. I'm just wondering. I mean, later you just answered a question saying that a map could take a week. So maybe can you explain that further, the discrepancy, or if I just misunderstood what you were saying at the beginning of your presentation?
yeah, through Chair Redekop to Councillor Merlehan, it's not that you misunderstood me. You have to realize that a lot of the data collection and maintenance takes a lot of time, and to produce these maps that can take 20 minutes not does it usually take 20 minutes, but to do some of that, to create the stuff behind it, to put in the information behind it, to collect that data, to input it, to maintain it, to update it regularly, takes a lot of time. And that's where you generate a lot of time, because you need good data to put out good information. Right now, our data is not as good as it should be, and we don't have as much data as we need in the system. So for example, there's stuff missing in our sanitary system. Our stormwater system needs a lot of work on the asset management side. We need someone to be going out doing data collection as well as inputting. So the GIS technician would be doing a lot of that work too, with our infrastructure to input the data, clean up the data, so that it only takes you 20 minutes to print a map, versus scrounging around trying to figure out where to find the data if it's even in there. So a lot of the work is just actually the leg work to get it done right.
Okay, and just the RFP that's before us with the data cleanup, is that what they're basically doing, is going to go in and get everything clean, or is that what you want the position person to be doing, is to clean up that data? So the position person will do a lot of maintenance, will continue the maintenance because it's always ongoing. Maintenance never stops, unfortunately. So some of the initial work will be done by this consultant in the one RFP. So they're going to do some cleanup, but they're also going to create an improved database for the road management system. So they're going to be trying to pull data from our current WorkTech system, which has analysis information in there. There's one other source of data that engineering has, plus the current road system we have in the GIS. They want to merge those together. So we're getting the expert consultant to do that, to build this new database that will work better for engineering staff.
So it's not just cleaning up data. There are other elements here in this RFP that we're getting some very detailed work done, just to get it done quickly so that engineering has it for this year for infrastructure and asset management. So they can do better asset management information and projecting for this, starting this year, hopefully. So that. Just cleanup is just part of the one RFP.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.
Oh, Larry, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair Redekop, to Mr. Vink. Are all of the townships and region and all the cities using the same software? And what is involved in downloading their software or their data into our software? Is there a lot of work involved in that? Or does it come through fairly clean and it's a flip of the switch?
So, so yes, to your question, Councillor Schatz, most of the data, most of the agencies in the area share the similar type of data structure. So they're all called shape files for the most part, or geodatabases, which are interchangeable basically. So we can move them to and from each system fairly quickly. So the updates of the 5 or 6 layers I get from the region every month, it's about an hour to, not even an hour, because by the time I do the FTP and switch it onto our server, I actually spend more time updating our XGS Online stuff than I do that switch. That switch takes me 20 minutes. Just because it's more moving it and I have to do certain things to do that move. So most of it is GIS is built in a system, and the product we use likes to make sure that everything is done in the best fashion, that it is open, that it is shareable in the most way possible. So we do work with a program that is try to make it share as best as possible.
Any other questions? Mr. Vink's reporting. So we sort of moved to the first one, the GIS modernization for data, because Councillor Merlan talked about, is this about cleanup? So can we go to that part? Do you have any other comments, Mr. Vink?
Just I'm going to explain why we did 2 different RFPs, just maybe for one portion. So the reason we did 2 different RFPs is because there's a bit of variation in what's happening in each RFP. So one is more dealing with the data, which is the first one. And the second RFP more deals with training and utilizing creation of apps. So it's using the data. Because we weren't sure that we would get enough, if we combined them, we weren't sure there was enough companies out there that would bid on them. We wanted that flexibility that we had to make sure that we could get a variety of people bidding. As it was, we only got 3 on the first and 2 on the second, and only 1 bid on both of them. So it would have narrowed down the opportunities, obviously, if we would have combined them. So there's different variations because not every GIS company does the same thing. So that's why we split them up to get our maximum opportunity to see what we would get for just our tenders on them. Just to note, everything is coming out of the modernization money. The money was set aside in 2020. We never utilized it because of COVID and not having enough staff time at the point. So now we're trying to get into using it. So it's all the modernization money that's being carried over. So you'll notice that we're sticking within our $90,000 budget of the modernization funds that we're using.
Okay, thanks very much. In the first one, there is a recommendation within the staff report done by Mr. Vink. How would you like to handle that recommendation? Mayor Schatz?
Thank you. If I can have a question first,
Yeah,
and
sure.
then I'd be happy to move it. How do the positions, how are they coordinated? Are they totally independent?
So yes, good question, Madam Mayor. So they are independent. So you could do one without the other. I wouldn't like to do RFP number 2 without RFP number 1 in place, because I like the data cleaned up first, then they can build off of that in RFP number 2. But they could go independent. So either one could move forward separate from the other completely. So like I said, they're kind of 2 different items and they're dealing with different things, even though they're all dealing with the GIS. So they could move forward separately.
Okay, that wasn't quite what I was getting at.
Oh, sorry.
That helps. That's okay. It helps me understand what I was getting at.
Mayor Shantz, you said you'd move it?
Yes, I move
The seconder,
recommendation.
Councillor McMillan. Any further questions or discussion? Councillor Shantz and then Councillor Martin.
Thank you. So you said we had 3 companies that could do the first one or the second one, I can't remember, and only 2 for the other one. Is there a company that would do them both that gave us a quote, and how much more would it cost to have the same company, and would it be more efficient to have the same company doing both if possible?
Yes, Councillor Sean. So there was only one company that bid on both. And I'm just trying to remember which one it was. Geographic Technologies Group, GTG, bid on both. However, they were more expensive on the second proposal, so it was not cheaper. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but I think there's a significant difference. So there was no cost savings in them doing both at all. So that's why we want the cheaper.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't actually asking cost savings. I was talking more efficiency and better commonality between the 2, or doesn't it make a difference?
It wouldn't make a difference. No, it doesn't make a difference in this case.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Through you to Jeremy. For the monies that are required for this consultant, what exactly are we getting? Are we getting so many hours of work? Do we know how big the job is and he'll complete it, or is it sort of open-ended?
Yes, Councillor Martin. So it is. They know exactly what the job is. It is not open-ended. There is a work plan and the timeline that they're going to work through, and they know what data they're working with, and they know what they have to do with that data. So there is a finality to this. So it's not going to go on forever. They're going to have to work within, because they're promising to complete the tasks that we've set before them within that budget. So we're not expecting that there would be any cost overruns either.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll read the motion that the Council of the Township of Woolwich consider report DS 07/2021 respecting the award of the GIS modernization for data project, approves the consultant for GIS services, the Geographic Technologies Group, GTG, at a total cost of $43,858.56 after HST rebate, and authorize the mayor and clerk by the bylaw to sign the consultant agreement. All those in favor? Okay, that's passed. So we'll go to the second one, the DS 08/2021 GIS modernization apps and training, selection of consultant. I think Jeremy explained the difference between the 2 positions. Mr. Vink, do you have anything else to say? No. So there's also the recommendation within Jeremy's staff report. Would you like to how would you like to handle this recommendation? Scott, would you like to move it?
Move the recommendation as written.
Seconder, Councillor Shantz. Any other discussion? Councillor Merlehan, go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Chair Redekop, to Mr. Vink. Can you just explain what kind of apps you're looking for? Like I read, you're looking for the building permit and the some asset management stuff, but you had showed us some examples earlier in your presentation about, the city of Brampton with their, trails and taxes and all sorts of things. Is that the training aspect of it? This company is going to be, I'm suppose, training you how to build these apps, or will they be building these apps out for us?
Yes, Councillor Morahan. So the training aspect is, remember I mentioned that each department has basically a person that kind of works with the product and the software regularly just to help their department and do some basic maps. So what has happened is that the software we use has moved away from one desktop version of their software to something else. And they are switching over and they want everyone to learn the new product. So I'm not highly skilled in that new product. It's called ArcGIS Pro. I want this company to come train staff generally across here to understand how to use ArcGIS Pro than what they're using today, because the one they're using today is going to go by the wayside of the dinosaur, as they say, in the next number of years. So I want staff to be trained on the new product. In terms of the apps, what's going to happen is they're going to talk to each of the departments for what their needs are. And rather than determine that they're going to build these apps today, they're going to talk to the departments to see if there's any specific needs as apps that they should prioritize. And then given that, we will prioritize which apps they will make, okay? They're costing it on a per hour basis to make those apps. So if fire department needs a specific app and we want to get this fire pre-plan app up and running better, they will get that one up and running. And then maybe there's a recreation app that somebody wants up and running, we could do that, for example. So they will get those apps up and running based on what a department needs to make them more efficient and to better serve their customers. This is some quick wins for us. They should be simplified apps, but some quick wins to just improve things and make things run a little better.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Shantz?
Thank you. Just to follow up on the apps with Mr. Vink, are these shareable that we could share with other cities or other townships back and forth once they're built, and it would just be a plug and play for everybody?
That's an excellent question, Councillor Shantz. Most of the applications, a lot that the company that we work with on the software that we purchase, they do push them out to the public as reusable apps or just convertible apps. So it's working with those to tweak them and then make it work better for us, or to build a new one if we want. Could you share them with others? Yes, you could. They would just have to then have similar data to input it, but they can change it. So once you build the basic structure, it's shareable. And that's the way the GIS world actually kind of works, is they do try to share a lot of this stuff. So share how to deal with things, share how to build apps and what apps are being done. You know, there's regular app sharing and ways to do it. So that's the bonus kind of along this line. It's not very proprietary. They do share.
Any other questions? So the recommendation is that the Council of the Township of Woolwich consider a report TS 08-2021 respecting the award of the GIS modernization apps and training project, approves the consultant of GIS services to Veris at the total cost of $44,496 after HST rebate. We authorize the mayor and clerk to sign the bylaw of this consultant agreement. All those in favor? That's passed. Thank you very much. So we go to the next, number 3 on your agenda, planning public. We have none. We have number 4, presentations. We have none. And now we have delegations. So I have instructions for the delegations. We have a few delegations scheduled this evening. Before we begin, I would like to remind delegations of some guidelines for participating in tonight's meeting. Please leave your video turned off and your microphone muted until you are called upon to speak. If your microphone is on and you are disrupting the meeting, you will be muted. Please be advised that tonight's meeting does not involve a question and answer period. Any questions you ask will be noted, and the appropriate staff member will follow up with you at a later date. Staff are not available for questions this evening. However, you can always contact them by phone or email if you have further questions. We ask that you keep your comments brief and refrain from repeating information delivered by another delegate. After you speak, please wait for any questions from council. Once there are no further questions, please turn your microphone and camera off again. You may leave the meeting after your delegation is done if you wish. If you would like to remain on the Zoom call and watch the remainder of the meeting, you may do so as well, as long as you keep your camera and microphone turned off. Any disruptive behavior may result in being removed from the meeting. We will begin with the first staff report. This is a zone change application for Noah W. Martin. We have Mr. Vink with us again. You may begin your overview when you are ready, Mr. Vink.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair Redekop, to council. This is zone change application 11-2020 Noah Martin for 1356 Tillman Road. You'll recall we held the public meeting back on January the 17th of this year. So this is the application here now to approve the site-specific zoning to permit the existing agricultural equipment sales and service operation as an agriculture-related use on the 0.97 hectare portion of the property. The use conforms to the provincial policy statement. Staff outlined in the report how it meets the requirements under the guidelines is on permitted uses on Ontario's prime agricultural areas, which ties to the definition of agriculture-related uses that are allowed on farms. and also conforms to the township official plan and the regional official plan. The proposed site-specific bylaw implements the area of operation, the size of the building, and outlines where parking and storage can take place, and therefore addressing everything. If council has any questions, I'm willing to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Vink? Councillor Merlehan, go ahead, and then Councillor Shantz.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Redicop. Through you to Mr. Vink. On looking at the comments, the building township building official has got comments about things being applied for, compliance with building code, reviewing structural upgrades, fire separation work, installation of a fire reservoir. The fact that that's in there, does that mean that this building currently doesn't have any of those? And is there a concern there then that the building isn't up to snuff, I suppose?
Through the chair to Councillor Merlehan, yes. The simple answer is yes. This is one of the ones we're legalizing of these on-farm businesses, where we're starting through that process. So as we know, a number of the properties out there in our rural farms, these industries and businesses do not meet code under building code requirements and fire code requirements. So as much as they're addressing planning conformity with zoning, they are also going to be addressing building code conformity. So they will have to meet code, not as agricultural buildings, because that's not what they are. They're industrialized. They'll have to meet the industrial regulations. So they have to be beefed up, and whatever that requires. They will pay the development charges applicably. And if need be, there will be a fire reservoir included as determined depending on the size of the structure. So building department is just raising this to say that the next step will be, you will need to do these items. You'll do the change of use and correct the building code requirements.
Okay, and then just another note from, I think it was the education component. They were looking for payment of taxes for the school board. Since this bill, the operation started in 2016, would this business be on the hook then for those education taxes back to 2016, or is the school board just looking for current?
So the school board would collect development charges on the change of use to an industrial. So from the development charge side, they'll collect them on the building permit side now when they go through the building permit process. On the taxation side, Mr. Petherick could probably answer this much better than I can. However, taxation and zoning are totally two different things. We don't interact. Assessment office goes out and assesses the value of a property and determines whether they think industrial or commercial is out there, and they set a taxation based on that. They don't care about the zoning at that point. They don't look at the zoning. They can be assessing a property as partially industrial, and the zoning may not permit it. So taxation has already probably taken place. MPAC just has assigned it on their taxation. So they'll split a farm parcel up, for example, into a portion of it's residential around the house, a portion of it's industrial if it has an industrialized business on it, and the rest is agricultural for the farm. So they've probably been collecting taxes on it in some sense under the property tax already.
Okay, thank you.
Better correct my errors and anything I said.
Mr. Petherick, you have a comment?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vink was absolutely correct. From what I recall, this property has been assessed correctly with the industrial assessment on it. So I think, as Mr. Vink was saying, it is really the report is talking more so about the development charges, not specifically the property taxes, because that was applied appropriately at the time of I guess the operation when it started.
Thank you. Councillor Shantz, you had a comment? Or?
Yeah, actually, I had the same kind of question that Councillor Merlehan asked, and I just want to make a comment. So did you get that information off the GIS, Jeremy?
You will notice that the attached zoning actually uses an air photo, which is GIS based. So trust me, everyone is using GIS in some form or fashion.
Thank you.
Comment, Larry. Any other questions before we go to the delegation? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Vink. Now we'll have Delegate Megan Garrity of GSP Group speak to council. Ms. Garrity, please turn your camera and microphone on, and you may begin when you are ready. Also, Mr. Noel Martin is on his phone on this Zoom call. Go ahead, Megan.
Great, thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Shantz, members of the council, staff, and members of the public. My name is Megan Garrity. I'm a planner with GSP Group. I'm here this evening on behalf of the applicant, Noah Martin, who is also on the line this evening. Our reason for registering this evening is just to say that we've had an opportunity to review the planning report, and we agree with the recommendation brought forward. And we just wanted to make ourselves available if there were any further questions. So that's all I've got for this evening. Thanks.
Does anyone from council have any questions for Ms. Garrity or Mr. Martin? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Garrity and Mr. Martin. Council, there is a recommendation in Mr. Vink's report. Would anyone like to move that recommendation? Councilor Martin, seconded by Councilor Shantz. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the recommendation, raise your hand. Thank you very much. That's passed. And the next staff report we have under delegation is the Peel Street Bridge Municipal Class Environmental Assessment. Engineering Project Supervisor Ryan Tucker is with us this evening to provide council with an overview of his report. Mr. Tucker, when you are ready, you may begin.
Thank you, Chair Reddicock. Alex, if you can throw the presentation up. Perfect. Thanks, Alex. Just have a short presentation this evening that should highlight some of the main points contained in the Peel Street Bridge recommendation report. All right, Alex, next slide, please. Okay, so staff have provided 3 potential options from the alternatives that were reviewed through the first phases of the environmental assessment project. Staff originally presented the closure and eventual removal of the structure as the preferred solution to council in November last year. This option would see the structure closed and removed once it was deemed unsafe. The roadway would also require turnarounds at either end of the structure to ensure vehicular safety. In conjunction with the closure recommendation, staff also recommended that the structure should be rehabilitated if upper government funding was to become available. The second option would be to rehabilitate the bridge for pedestrian use. This option would see repairs completed to the structure to ensure that it was safe for pedestrian use. The bridge deck would be modified to reduce potential loading, and turnarounds at the ends of the bridge would again be required. The third option that council previously discussed was the replacement of the bridge. If council directs staff towards this option, the environmental assessment project would continue onto phase 3 and 4, where alternate bridge designs would be reviewed. Staff would determine a preferred design for the new structure, and again, after seeking public feedback, a recommendation report would be brought in front of council for a final decision. Next slide, please. So although the report lays out the potential long-term costs for each alternative, I wanted to highlight the initial year 1 cost for each alternative and the associated scope of work. The closure of the structure would have an initial capital cost of approximately $250,000. This is mostly related to the installation of the turnarounds at the end of the structure, along with some modifications to the structure to ensure that no access was permitted. The initial cost to rehabilitate the bridge for pedestrian use is approximately $1.1 million. This cost is mostly related to replacing specific structural members on the bridge and also installing the turnarounds again. The replacement option would see the environmental assessment project continue at a cost of approximately $84,000 to complete the study. Depending on the type and size of structure recommended to replace the existing bridge, the cost would be in the range of $4 to $8 million for a new structure. Next slide, please. I also wanted to highlight the environmental factors that each option primarily addresses. The closure and removal option is directly related to the financial environment, as the Peel Street Bridge is an aging structure past its intended useful life, which in the future will cost more and more money to repair. The pedestrian rehabilitation option is related more to the cultural heritage and recreational aspects of the structure. The built heritage value of the structure would be maintained, as well as its original intended use as a river crossing in the area, but specifically for pedestrians instead of vehicles in this instance. The replacement of the bridge with a new structure is directly related to transportation and the ability for vehicles and pedestrians to cross the Grand River, including horse and buggy traffic. This provides a non-regional route for traffic to traverse the Grand River in the Winterburn area. Next slide, please. So currently, staff are just waiting council's decision, which will be on February 23rd, and we'll proceed based on that direction. Either to continue the EA to phases 3 and 4 if a new structure were to be chosen, or to file the notice of study completion for either closure or pedestrian rehabilitation options. So with that, I will take any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Brian, for highlighting and doing very good work on possible decisions this evening. Thanks very much. Councilor, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, through you to Mr. Tucker. If we would move on to option number 3, and then we have to do another EA study or a further EA study, would that determine the type of structure we would put up, whether it would be heritage related or whether it would just be a modernized 2-lane bridge? Or at what point does the decision get made as to whether we're going to try and make it look heritage or whether we're just going to get a river crossing?
Yes, so you through you, Chair Redicop, to you, Councillor Shantz. So the continuation of the EA would review all potential alternatives for a new structure, whether that's 2 lanes, 1 lanes, concrete structure, steel structure, and whether it would have heritage enhancements as well. So similar to what's taken place so far, staff would review all the options, come up with what we felt was a preferred solution, and then go out to the public, seek public feedback, and then based on that, come to council with an actual recommendation for the new type of structure.
Councillor Shantz, a follow-up?
Yeah, so if I could follow up on that. So then would staff come back with a couple of different recommendations and say if it's a modernized 2-lane bridge, it's going to cost this much. If it's a modernized 1-lane bridge, it's cost this much. If it's a heritage bridge, it's going to cost X. And you know, these are your options. Which one do you choose, or who makes that final decision?
Yeah, through you, Chair Redicop, to Councillor Shantz. So like I alluded to previously, staff would come up with a recommended option. So when we go through the public engagement for a new structure, all the information would be laid out, potential costs, like rendering so people could see what it looks like, things like that. And then based on that, we would take the feedback we received and then provide a recommendation to council.
Thank you.
Councillor McMillan, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Redicop, through you. Just to clarify, staff would come back with a recommendation, but staff have already made a recommendation, correct? Like the recommendation that we close the bridge is still staff's recommendation, but we've gone down this path because of how council reacted to that first recommendation that was brought to us. So it would be a modified staff recommendation. Am I correct?
Through you, Chair Redicop, to you, Councillor McMillan. Currently, staff's recommendation is to keep the bridge closed. If it is council's directive to replace it with a new structure, then we would take in all the data and the public consultation, and we would make a recommendation for what staff feels would be an appropriate new bridge.
Thank you.
Any other comments to Mr. Tucker? Questions? Mayor Shantz?
Thank you. As I look at this and think about it, I'm struggling a little bit. Just taking the finances out of it, I'm struggling with what the right answer is. But I think I'm leaning towards the rehab for pedestrian and buggy traffic, but I don't quite see that here. Would the pedestrian rehab include buggy traffic?
Yeah, through you, Chair Redicop, to Mayor Shantz. Unfortunately, we have not been able to determine a way to keep this as a pedestrian-only structure and still allow horse and buggy traffic. If you are going to allow horse and buggy to traverse this, a car is going to be able to get across it.
So we do have other places where buggies only are allowed. I think of the St. Jacobs coming off of Highway 85, and I realize a small car can get through there. Oh, there's giggling. Okay.
Fred uses it all the time.
I have a very small car.
Okay. But you know, would there not be some way to configure it that would allow pedestrians and buggies, but strongly discourage all but the smallest of cars?
Through Chair Reddick, to Mayor Shantz. I'm sure we could come up with a solution that would allow horse and buggy, but again, you are going to get the people that are going to abuse it, similar to that underpass under the highway, and that is staff's concern that you will get people that are shortcutting through here, and potentially you're reducing the useful life of the structure if that happens.
Well, what was the traffic like on that road before the bridge was closed?
The ADT, I believe, is just over 100 cars, Mayor Shantz.
So there's not much traffic expected there. It would have to be someone who really wanted to get through, had the right size vehicle, and I would venture to say wouldn't get heavy farm equipment or a big, Ford truck going across it. Is that fair?
Through you, Chair Reddick, to Mayor Shantz. Yeah, I would agree. Again, we can set up something. Currently, we have the height restrictors there that do limit the size of vehicle. I'm sure we could come up with something that would narrow that up even more. But again, it is staff's concern that it will be abused. And then the other concern is, unfortunately, horse and buggies aren't a standard size. So we have to reach out to the community and really do a lot of engagement to see kind of what their maximum size would be that they need to get across the bridge.
Sure. If we were to go that route, would the pricing for option 2 be kind of the one we would use? Or would it be different?
Through you, Chair Reddick, to Mayor Shantz. I think we'd have to revise that pricing potentially, and I'd have to have my consultant just review what kind of loading a horse and buggy would be to see if that rehabilitation style would work for that. But that's something we can review.
Okay. I guess why I'm leaning there, and maybe this is getting into debate, Mr. Chair, I hope that's okay.
Yeah, okay.
But just to give my rationale, is it maintains the heritage value of the bridge for what it is. It also allows buggy traffic, which is our main concern. I don't think we have a real huge concern about, excuse me, about other automobile traffic being able to get across it. And it leaves it open for pedestrian and cycling. And so that's sort of where I'm leaning.
Jared, did you want to make a comment right now?
Yeah, sorry, through you, Chairman Reddick, to Mayor Shantz. I think I just want to be careful about the horse and buggy access. When we went through this in the Glasgow Street Bridge too, we've talked to a number of folk in the Mennonite community, and I think we need to be very clear. We don't believe there is an option to allow horse and buggy that wouldn't allow, and not even a small vehicle, but a vehicle of that size, like I would say a truck. If you can get a horse and buggy through, you're likely to get an F-150 pickup truck through, and sorry to pick on Ford. But I think that that is that is the magic solution that we're not even sure the Mennonite community has come up with, and we've engaged them on that. If somebody has an idea for that, we're absolutely open to listen to that. But I think that there is no way to do that. There's no standardized buggy. As soon as you've opened it up to the buggy, that completely changes the pedestrian nature too, because we were going to narrow up the deck to only permit pedestrians. So I just want us to be cautious. If we're going to go down that slope, we're almost opening it up to vehicles to travel across it too. And the natural enforcement concern too, right? You're not going to have police sitting down there policing that, and as soon as we have access for a vehicle that can fit, the same size as a horse and buggy. I think we're right back to where we are. We've got a heritage structure or a heritagely significant structure that is just unfortunately costing us a lot of money. And I think I just want to reiterate why we're here in the first place. We've struggled at a staff level, and I appreciate the difficulty here. But I would just be cautious about mixing any of the options available. I think we've done some good vetting, and we would suggest that those are the only options. If we want to allow vehicles, it likely needs to be a new structure, and then we can deal with that heritage aspect of the structure through that option.
Okay, thank you, Jared. Councillor Shantz and then Councillor Martin.
Yeah, thank you. Whatever we do, it's going to take a few years, and at what point do we have to put in the turnaround anyway, whether we proceed with closing the bridge or with putting a new bridge in? Do we have to put the turnaround in so that the snowplows and things can turn around at this point, or are we just going to live with what we've got?
Through you, Chair Redicop, to Councillor Shantz. If council's direction is to rehabilitate for pedestrian or close, I would recommend putting the turnarounds in as soon as possible, like including them in the 2022 budget. Right now, we do have waste management trucks that are backing down Peel Street so that they don't have to turn around there. It's very tight and it is dangerous for our snowplows. So I would recommend if it is council's direction to do those two options, that we would include this in the 2022 budget to do that work.
But my question is a little further than that. If we do decide that we want to replace the bridge, for instance, it's going to be a number of years before that construction gets underway. Would we put a turnaround in the meantime, or would we just live with what we have?
Through you, Chair Redicop, to Councillor Shantz. That's a good question. Understanding that the ultimate those turnarounds would not be required. We understand that this area might have potential for some recreational purposes. So we could look to include a turnaround and future-proof the area with some recreational access to the river, just so we're not throwing away those turnarounds potentially. But that's a tough one, understanding that ultimately that would be throwaway money potentially.
It would be somewhat dependent, I would think, on council's will, right? I mean, from a design perspective, and Ryan can help me out here. If council wanted to debenture the entire amount, it really just falls down to finances in that case, and we would assume a minimum 1 year design. So potentially, construction in 2023, I guess, if we wanted to play that out and money wasn't an option. And Ryan, feel free to, if that's not quite accurate, but I would assume if money wasn't an issue, we could likely implement that.
Yeah, I would agree. If we want to throw a bunch of money at this, we can get it designed fairly quickly and get this built in 2023. I would agree.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. We have beat all these options to the ground several times. There's only one option that will meet the needs of a rural farming community, and that's a new structure that will accommodate people walking, horse and buggies, cars, farm tractors, and their wagons. A new bridge is the only one that will meet their needs.
Thank you. Mayor Shantz, did you have another follow-up? No. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Tucker? Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Redicop. Through you, how much is currently in the budget? Is the closing option currently in our infrastructure budget? And so if we go above that, then we're looking at debenture. And the other piece of that is, can infrastructure money be spent for recreation? So if we are replacing this as a pedestrian heritage bridge, for me, if we've limited our infrastructure reserve and our infrastructure budget to roads and bridges, and now this is a pedestrian heritage structure, for me, that money, I'm okay if we open up our infrastructure budget to active transportation. Believe me, I'm okay with that. But if that hasn't been the plan, is that the plan going forward? So two questions there. how much do we have budgeted for, and what is it above that we would have to debenture? And if it is option 2, where does that money come from in the budget?
Through Chair Redekop, to Councillor McMillan. Currently, the 2021 budget does not have any money in it for the Peel Street Bridge. Staff are recommending that if we do proceed on the project, that it would be debentured. In terms of using recreation for IS, I don't know, Jared, is that something you can touch on?
Sure. Yeah. Through Chairman Redekop to Councillor McMillan. So the Infrastructure Reserve Fund can certainly be used. Both recreation and community services have access to that account. I think just so we're clear too, just the fact that if council was selecting of option 2, the pedestrian use only, keeping the bridge as is, it still has heritage significance. So I think it's worth touching on that point. We all appreciate the heritage value of the Peel Street structure, but that is not the same as designating it, right? So there are 2 different things there. So we staff are still not recommending designation of the structure because it's in our care and control. We would see designation as an important piece for, say, private buildings and the like, but certainly staff and council respect the significance of the heritage of its heritage value. So that is not contained in the recommendation, but designating any structure of heritage significance is always in council's care and control. So I just want to be clear about that. This recommendation, if we were to use it pedestrian only, keep the structure, is not an automatic designation of its heritage, a heritage designation. That would still be a council decision outside of this recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Any other questions before we go to the delegation? For Mr. Tucker? Okay, thank you, Mr. Tucker, for answering our questions and being helpful in our delaying our decision. I really appreciate all the work that you did and the way that you set out your report this evening. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Redekop.
So now we go to Delegate Terry Rohr of Woolwich Heritage Committee. Mr. Rohr, please turn on your audio and video, and you have 10 minutes to present, and you may begin when you're ready.
Okay, good evening. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, good evening, Mayor Shantz, councillors, and staff. My name is Terry Rohr. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Woolwich Heritage Committee to present the committee's recommendation for the historic Winterburn Bridge. To begin with, the heritage value of the bridge has already been well established by previous studies and experts. The bridge was included in the regional study of bridges with cultural heritage value, arches and trusses and beams, the Grand River Watershed Heritage Bridge Inventory. It also has a dedicated write-up in the website historicbridges.org. They refer to the bridge as a very rare example that has excellent historic integrity with no major alterations adding to its significance. Council will recall that KLG from the ACO made a detailed presentation to Council in December about the heritage value of the bridge and why it should be saved. Also, the environmental assessment that accompanied options and recommendations for the bridge in 2017 contained its own cultural heritage evaluation of the bridge. Among other things, the environmental assessment recommended that the bridge should be considered for designation under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act and added to the Woolwich Heritage Registrar. History of the steel bridge. Settlement of this part of Upper Canada began to pick up after the American Revolution and Rebellion in 1776, and settlers moved north. Their settlement flow increased after the 1812 to 14 conflict, with more European settlers arriving. Transportation was very limited, with rivers being both a means of moving things and obstacles to travel. Locally, where feasible, river fords were initially used, but had severe seasonal limitations. The solution was then build bridges where needed, using locally sourced timbers. These bridges had lifespan limitations of about 25 to 30 years before rot weakened them and required replacement. Covered bridges were an expensive compromise, but were sparingly used due to high costs. In the latter part of the 1800s, industrialization provided another cost-effective alternative. the riveted iron bridge. These bridges also had the benefit of being partially prefabbed and thus being able to be assembled quickly on the site using manual labor as well as steam-powered equipment for heavy lifting. The Winterburn Bridge is one of only 2 remaining bridges in the township of this early 1900s innovative construction solution. In the late 1940s, post-war prosperity increased automotive traffic significantly, in turn requiring greater effort for winter snow and ice clearing. The availability of huge underground salt beds in the vicinity of Goderich and Sarnia made cheap salt melting on roads viable when de-icing. Fortunately, the Century steel bridges were vulnerable to the unforeseen salt corrosion, as is the case of this Winterburn Bridge. The temporary solution was closure of the bridge. This has created a challenge to local residents, particularly the Old Order community, being forced into long detours on busier highways. The Township Heritage Committee is recommending that this historic symbol of early 1900s engineering innovation be added to the Township Heritage Registrar, and that it be saved and restored to usability for the local residents. Here is the motion passed by the Heritage Committee in January. Identify the bridge as unique historical structure worthy of saving for future generations. Because funds are not immediately available to maintain the closure of the bridge, to ensure it is not used pending to a search for funds, that the bridge be designated as unique and historical and not be demolished until funding is available, and it would be restored for limited use. We ask the council support in this motion passed by the Woolwich Heritage Committee. Thank you.
Does council have any questions for Mr. Rohr? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Rohr.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Okay, now, there is a recommendation in the report. Would anyone like, let's talk about the issues that are involved. So we received some more correspondence from Winterburn residents, and we had, I think it was Miss Hodgkins had said that she was go out and do some fundraising. I think by her letter, she identified maybe more places where we could go out and get grant proposals, but I didn't hear that she obtained any extra funding for the proposition of keeping the bridge there and making it a walking pedestrian bridge. But I just wanted to identify that we did receive that correspondence. But I have a question before we begin. So there's a buggy bridge north of this one. Is that just for buggies, or is it for farm equipment, and or is it used to walk across? Mr. Tucker, do you know?
Yeah, Chair Redekop. So that is a privately owned bridge, and is specifically for the Mennonite community. We do have signage on both ends of that bridge, specifically saying it is private and not to use it. So it like I said, it's not to be used by anybody but the Mennonite community.
Okay, thank you very much for that information. Okay, any other? How do you want to proceed with this? Councilor Martin first.
Thank you. I just say this, that any option that we look at has some merit. But if we don't do it properly today, in 25 years, we're going to be in exactly the same position we are now. And what are people going to say then? They're going to look back at the council of 2021 and they'll have nothing positive to say because we made a poor decision. If we build a structure that will last 75 or 100 years and go out 50 years, what do you think the people are going to say? Well, they had some vision, they did the right thing. If we had to build it now, it cost us 2-3 times as much. So I want to be on the side where we look ahead and make a good decision.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Of course not, because everybody knows that's true.
Councilor Schatz might have a different opinion. We'll see.
No, mine is somewhat similar. I do agree that we should have some structure there. I don't like the idea of just repairing what we've got, because like Councillor Martin said, then in 25 or 30 years, we're gonna, and between now and the 25 years, we're gonna be repairing it constantly, and it's gonna be a constant money pit. So I think we have to put a new structure in if we're gonna do something, and or shut it down completely. I don't like the idea of patching it. I don't think that's good money. So yeah, I would support Councillor Martin on what he said.
Thank you. Councillor McMillan?
Thank you, Chair Redicott, through you. I'm certainly against voting to close the bridge and tear it down right now. I'm worried about how we're going to pay for this. I have no problem if we vote for option 2. I'm sure that in building a new bridge, the heritage character of the old bridge can be incorporated into it. There's lots of really great designs. I have no problem maintaining the current bridge as a heritage bridge. I'll get on board with that. I'm against debenturing the full boat for this. I think that putting all of this on future generations is future generations, like future councils, future residents is unfair, and that we need to not pay for the whole thing right now. But if we are going to say that a bridge belongs there, then I think we need to find some money, not all the money, but some money for it, certainly. So I'm certainly against closing the bridge and tearing it down right away. I think there's some options here where we can either have the EA assessment that is currently there, and I believe that the bridge would stay there for 10 years before it had to be torn down. We could go with that EA assessment, put in the turnarounds, leave the bridge there for 10 years. That gives council, that gives the residents that are interested 10 years to find funding for that. Hopefully it wouldn't take that long. I'd also be easily convinced to do the EA assessment going to phase 3, phase 4, putting in the turnarounds and saying we're going to do the EA assessment, and then we're going to figure out where we're going to get how much money is it? Sorry, I turned the page. The 4 to 8 million for the bridge. We at least buy ourselves some time. So I'd be on board with either the EA assessment to close it and leave the bridge there for 10 years, or going forward with phase 3, phase 4, and putting in the turnarounds and then trying to decide where we can get the money after. I'm struggling. I'm not going to be able to go forward with either tearing the bridge down or completely debenturing a new structure without some type of revenue to pay for that.
We have Councillor Shantz and Councillor Martin leaning toward, we need a bridge there and we need a new bridge in order to be more efficient. And Councillor McMillan said we have 10 years to just leave the bridge there, have it closed, and put the turnarounds in, and then in those 10 years maybe find different avenues of funds. I think I'm hearing. So is there anyone else? Councillor Merlehan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Redicott. Through you, just general comments about this whole process. Yeah, $8 million is, an astronomical amount of money, and you got to look at the data, and you have to take staff's recommendations into heart when you look at a bridge of this magnitude financially for what the payoff is. At its peak, it was getting 100 vehicles across there. The data showed that it was somewhere around 12 horse and buggy traffic per day, which when you look at the perspective, I mean, that's a tiny amount of traffic. I'm trying to deal with traffic calming issues in Elmira. Got some upset residents that they have 750 cars on their street a day that they're upset about, yet their street is designed to take more than 3,000 a day. Anything on regional things with crosswalks, you just to get a crosswalk, we have to prove that for 8 hours straight, 750 people are going to walk across that crosswalk every hour for 8 hours. So these are the kind of traffic numbers that we look at in all these other areas. And when we're looking at a bridge that has 100 crossings, which means you can divide that in half as a vehicle coming and going, then and you attach an $8 million price tag to it, that there's a lot of $8 million will go a long way in some pretty significant projects throughout the township for a bridge that's very not used very well. And when you look at this crossing, the only value that this crossing has for the bridge is its heritage value. We've heard from the experts, we've heard from our own heritage committee, we've heard from the community itself, who it seems they want the bridge to be preserved as is, and to have that structure there. And if anybody's been out on it, it is a beautiful structure, and it certainly needs some love, but the value is in the fact that it's been there for 100 years, and if we can prolong that life for 30 more years as a pedestrian bridge, you should be able to get 30 more years out of that. And with some regular maintenance, you go to cities all over the world that have structures that are, hundreds of years old, that with proper maintenance can be prolonged for future generations to appreciate as well. So, in 50 years from now, I'll have no problem justifying spending just over $1 million to preserve that bridge for 30, 50, however many more years that you can get out of it. It depends on what we value. And replacing, it doesn't make sense to tear the structure down and replace it with concrete or whatever for a two-way traffic, because the community has already complained about the traffic issues in Winterburn. You're inviting more traffic, especially if you have a 2-lane bridge. You are just begging for more cars to come through there because it's a shortcut to get to Northfield. There'll be tons of people that start using that. That's not what the community is asking for. They're asking for this bridge that's been in their community for well over 100 years to be fixed up and be maintained for the community to use. So, I hope council can see that as a much greater value, that heritage value than just a simple trying to get from A to B when there are other opportunities for all communities to get across the bridge. So I'd be more interested in council choosing to support to rehabilitate the bridge for pedestrian use. But I also would support closure until some funds could be identified to ease up that burden as well. But I don't really want to have any part of tearing down the history in that community and in our whole community of Woolwich Township, which there aren't very many of these left, and I think we should do everything we can to preserve what we do have. Thank you.
So you would be agreeing with Councillor McMillan about closing the bridge for up to 10 years, but looking toward saving the bridge as it is as a pedestrian structure?
That would be my second choice. I would like to see the rehab happen first. If we do that, the bridge will be open. We could probably have it fixed by next year, and have it available to the community. If we have to debenture some funding for that, then so be it. But if council doesn't have the appetite for that, then I think closure and look for some funds in the meantime. That's more or less what happened with Glasgow Street as well. So who knows?
Thanks for clarifying that, Councillor Merlin. Councillor Martin?
Thank you. I've heard all those arguments before. I agree with very few of them. 10 years ago, we spent $30-some million on the WMC. I think we built some community centers. We built a fire hall. Was $8 million an issue then? No, your hands would have went up right away. So it's not an issue with $8,000 or $8 million. This is a project that is needed in the community. And when it comes to funding, at least 3 occasions I have asked what it would look like if we debentured, how it's going to impact our taxes each year. What would be the impact if we had 3, 4, or 5% for capital infrastructure above our taxes to help pay this? I have never got any of that. It hasn't been here. And I think those are all important things when it comes to making a decision. Talk about heritage. I've said before, we can incorporate the old bridge into something new that's usable, that should be a benefit to anybody. I would think the community would get together and work on the help with the design when we have different designs. I think if we did it right, it could be a win situation for everybody. But to say, well, there's not much traffic or it's not worth it. Most things that we do in the township on paper do not make sense. The splash pad, $30,000 out a year, but it's got benefit. A lot of people don't use it. Our whole recreation thing, how we subsidize it by $3 million. Does that make sense on paper? No, but it's got benefits. I can go right down the whole thing. We got a letter that everybody would have seen during budget time about Route 21. I can understand where he's coming from. On paper, it does not make sense, but it's got benefits. Our whole transit system in the city, when on paper, does not make sense. It sucks a lot of tax dollars out of it, but it's got benefits. This bridge is no different. On paper, you might say it doesn't make sense, there's not enough traffic, but it certainly has benefits for our community of farmers and stuff that need the bridge.
Thank you. Councillor Shantz?
I like the idea, through you, sorry, how we pick and choose the amounts we're going to spend, because the range is from 4 to 8, and if we don't want it, it's 8, and if we want it, it's 4. So it's probably somewhere in between there, but it's not either or. And so I did do a little homework, and I talked to Mr. Tucker today about that, and the 8 comes from what they did in London. With their bridge, their heritage bridge, and they put a brand new heritage bridge in to make it look like the old one, and that's where the 8 million comes from. If we put in a more reasonable structure, it could be somewhere in the 5 to 6. So yeah, so we don't know what that number is, so I don't think we can use the numbers to make the decision. I think we have to make a decision on whether it's going to help the community or not, and I'm saying it will help the community, but I don't like throwing money after something that's deteriorating already and is going to continue to deteriorate. That to me is not wise use of money.
Councillor Merlehan?
Yeah, through you, Chair Redicop. I was wondering if I could direct my question to either Mr. Tucker or Jared Poupé. My question is, and we've heard this before, but Councillor Shantz doesn't want to throw money at something that's going to deteriorate. After a 1.1 million rehab into the bridge, that the extension of the life, I mean, that the 20 years on the low end, with proper maintenance, how far can you go with that kind of rehab? Or if you did more, every 10 years or something, you did a more of a rehab on it, light rehab to just refresh things. Is it throwing money away as Councillor Shantz would have us believe, or or is it are you getting a newish type bridge that that will withstand the test of time for decades?
Yeah, through Chair Redicop to Councillor Merlihan. So when you're doing a rehabilitation on a bridge, we're specifically replacing any of the members that are either structurally deficient or have issues with it, right? So we're taking the bridge up to getting it up to the code where it's safe. So to your question of whether we could continue to rehabilitate this until the end of time, eventually you're going to have a brand new structure because you're going to replace every single member in the bridge. But again, it comes down to cost. How much are you willing to spend on this bridge, and for how long? Because the longer it sits there, the more expensive it will become to rehabilitate every year.
And then just one other question: when you look at your bridge report, the OSM, how many other bridge structures in the township, when you put a priority level on them, where would Peel Street Bridge be as a priority on that list of bridges that require a lot of attention? And I forget what the number is on what we need. Is it something like 7 or 8 million in bridge repairs in the township in the next 5 years? Can you speak to where Peel Street Bridge falls into a category of what needs attention?
Yeah, through Chair Redicop to Councillor Merlihan. Since it's currently closed, I would consider it one of the higher priorities. Maybe Jared could speak to actually how we're planning to roll things out, but understanding that it is closed, it would be at the top of the list. Understanding if council wants to keep it.
That's right. And just to follow up on that, it's the our bridges, we rank them on condition. So the lower condition ranking, then the higher priority it receives, right? So being it's a closed structure, it would receive high priority. And just to sort of follow up too on that first question through you, Chairman Redicop, to Councillor Merlihan, I think it's day and night. And I think the real question council needs to wrestle with is if it's pedestrian only, then and that's why I think staff has done a good job of being cognizant from the fiscal responsibilities and the maintenance. So if it's pedestrian only, then yes, it would limit the wear and tear on the bridge. Obviously, it would expand its life. I would always be an advocate to say everything wears out. Nothing is forever. I mean, that's something we need to look at as well. So to Councillor Shance's point, is exactly what's happening in Glasgow. We're going to, because we received upper government funding, we're able to continue on with that. But if that wasn't for that upper government funding, we wouldn't be able to do that, right? I mean, and that would be sort of throwing good money after bad. But because of that, we're able to expand that useful life. And Peel Street would be no different. If council wants the bridge to be used by all, including vehicular traffic, then what staff is proposing is that it would be a new structure. That gets you the longevity, that what we would consider as good value for the dollar on that. Opening up Peel Street for vehicular traffic, we would not see as good value, and you would not get the life cycle out of this aged structure because it wasn't designed for that in its intended purpose 100 years ago. I don't think we can get past 7-tone, and I think we've already vetted that many times at a Ford F-150. You just need a trailer with a lawnmower and you're done, right? So I think that's really where we're at, and people don't respect the structure, despite what others say. Our experience is people, if it's a bridge, they will use it. So we think that there's value in a new structure. If it's vehicles that council wants to move, if it's pedestrians, then we would be generally comfortable with the old structure as is and rehab to that use.
Donald, did you have a comment?
No, actually, it was an accident. I turned my
Okay,
video on.
sorry. No problem.
Thank you for checking.
Thank you, Mr. Capay. Councillor McMillan?
Thank you, Chair Redicop. Through you to, I don't have any idea. I have never seen the Woolwich Heritage Registry. This bridge is not yet on it. There's a request that we put this bridge on it. My question is, where would this rank on the priorities of heritage projects in Woolwich if we're going to start spending money on heritage structures, properties, which I think would be fantastic. Where would this rank in the priority list of heritage buildings or structures in Woolwich? And then, do we plan on having a heritage budget? Is this going to be an annual thing that we, pick heritage projects out and rehabilitate or maintain? Or is this a one-off that we're just going to do one time?
Mr. Poupey?
Thank you. Through you, Chairman Redicop, to Councillor McMillan. A bit of a loaded question. I am not going to profess to be a heritage expert by any means. I would suggest that I wouldn't see this as a ranking system for us. Again, I want to throw this ball back into council's court, designating the structure.
Sorry, can I interrupt for just 1 second? I do apologize. Not a loaded question at all. I don't mean like there's nothing behind the curtains here. It's an honest question that just, if we are going to pursue the heritage value of the structure, I think it's more just for council to ask the question, is this the top heritage priority in the township? And are we going to have an annual heritage budget?
So again, it's through you, Chairman Redicop, to Councillor McMillan. I apologize for the way that may have came across. I guess the struggle is we have a heritage landscape out in Westmount Rose, Hill Street. That's what I'm aware of. From an infrastructure services, if I'm selfish, just from our perspective, and we looked at it from an engineering lens, I'm not aware of anything else that we have designated that is infrastructure related. I think there's a number of private buildings that have been designated, but I am not well versed in that. So I'm not aware of anything in the public domain outside of the landscape in Westmount Rose. But if I guess our position has been that we don't see the value to designate it. We understand its significance. Staff appreciate the significance of the Peel Street structure. And the fact that it is in the township's care and control allows us, to preserve and protect that. Again, it is completely council's desire if they want to designate, but from a staff perspective, we don't see the value. If I'm honest, that's how I see that. But it's possible that Mr. Pomponi might have some more insight in that.
Sorry, can I just quick follow up there? Like, I don't think council needs to designate it a heritage structure in order to use heritage as a rationale for funding. There's two things there. We can say we're going to rehab this bridge because of the heritage value without taking the step of designating it a heritage structure.
Agreed.
Mr. Pomponi, you have a comment?
I'll try to assist. I don't know if I can, but Councillor McMillan's comment is bang on. Designation is not needed to provide funding. Designation is there to provide a certain level of protection. A registry is, it's a document that lists buildings within a municipality that are of interest to the municipality for heritage purposes. It gives a bit of protection where you can have some review, and it might allow for a delay of the issuance of demolition permits. That's different from a designated property in the Ontario Heritage Act, which has a different level of protection. In some cases, if you have a property that is designated, you can still have them demolished through a demolition permit. It's appealable and it can go to a hearing. But if it's not on a registry, which I would say is no protection whatsoever, then there's obligations on the Ontario Building Code to issue demolition permits within a certain time frame. So there's an obligation to issue. If it's on a registry, it gives us a bit of additional review, which I think is maybe 30 or 60 days. I'm going off the top of my head, which is not, my memory's not always that great. We don't have a registry. A registry is something that would be formally adopted by council. The Heritage Committee is actively working on a registry. I personally did some work on it to identify stone buildings and things like that of properties that were of interest. That's being worked on. It's not yet approved by council. It would have to come back to council for approval. So that's how a heritage registry works. And like I said, it takes time. I initiated one of my previous position, and we were working on it for 5 or 10 years. It's just a lot of work to be done. And you're looking at the Heritage Committee to the volunteers to do that work to help build it up. So I don't know if that helps, but.
Thank you, Mr. Pomponi. I think that's helpful. Any other comments, questions?
Procedural. I have procedural input for council. Yeah. So I see council's torn on this one and struggling. I just wanted to remind you of your procedural bylaw, which says decisions of committee of the whole do not require a motion of reconsideration if not yet ratified by council. So if you make a decision tonight, as long as it doesn't go through council ratification, you don't have to worry about the motion of reconsideration having to be dealt with yet. Also, if you get to a vote tonight with the tie vote, the chair would vote. So Councillor Redekop would vote. And if it's a recorded vote, the chair votes. So just wanted to highlight that just so we don't get into difficulties.
Okay, thank you for that helpful comment. Councillor Merlehan?
Yeah, through you. I'm just going to put this out here. I'm going to put a motion with the, I guess, the A recommendation to, oh, I can't read this. Where's my glasses? To do a rehab, a pedestrian rehab using the recommendation wording. And I'd also ask for a recorded vote just so Fred can jump in on the action.
Thanks. Okay, so we have a mover of number A under the recommendation. Do I have a seconder?
Okay, that fails.
Sorry, my internet cut out there. So can I just ask, was Councillor Merlehan moving recommendation A?
A, yes. Which speaks to the permanent closure or pedestrian rehabilitation, I think, yeah.
I'll second that.
Councillor McMillan. Any more discussion? Mayor Shantz?
Thank you. I am still struggling. I like the rehabilitation. I like the heritage value of it. I like the idea from a tourism perspective of having the covered bridge, the Glasgow Street Bridge, and the Peel Street Bridge as an attraction for the area. I'm struggling, particularly for the older community, with getting the horse and buggies across the bridge. And so that's what I'm struggling with at the moment.
Councillor McMillan, go ahead.
The way I understand it is if we moved ahead with this, the door would not be closed to rehabbing it for vehicular traffic in the future. I wouldn't be in favor of closing it regardless at any time. And the only added expense would be we'd have to do another EA assessment. So for me, I think that this one makes the most sense because to move ahead as if we're closing it or rehabbing it for pedestrians, for me, financially makes the most sense, but at the same time, we're leaving the door open to upper levels of government, the community to fundraise, to have more input regarding which option that they prefer. So for me, I think that this buys us the most time for the least amount of cost up front and doesn't close any doors going forward.
Councillor Shantz?
If we're going to proceed like that, what is the threshold on the amount of dollars we have to have in the bank before we proceed to something different? I think we have to know that information or get some idea there so that we can see whether it's even doable or not. If we say we have to have half of it, chances are that's never going to happen. If we say we need 10% of it, then that might happen. So I think we should have some kind of a threshold attached to it then.
Councillor Martin?
I have a few notes from the community. I've been debating all night whether I should read them or where they fit in. And I thought I mean, I could do it tonight or wait till we come to a council meeting. It's just coming from the local community.
Go ahead.
The first one, we as a community are very disappointed in your decision-making of the Peel Street Bridge. We have heard the mayor say it is her responsibility to represent everyone. So we ask, when will she start? The second one came right from across the road here at the hardware store, and it went like this. How are you making out with the Winterburn Bridge? I said, it won't happen. Why, he asked. I said, there's no support for a new bridge. Strange that you should listen to a guy from Michigan, USA. That's where I thought Michigan was. Or some other so-called expert, both of who know nothing about our community and don't live here. We are the ones who pay your bills and pay taxes, yet very little consideration was given to us. And I think there's a fair bit of truth in that. I know they filled out a lot of comment sheets. We have yet to see any of them. They certainly came out in droves to the 2 public meetings that we had. They were there in large numbers. And then Thursday, I got a phone call from Mr. Woods, and he told me he's going to call everybody. And he said he certainly endorses a new structure, a good investment in the future, and something that's beneficial to the community.
Thank you. Comments from the community? Councilman Rohan?
Yeah, sorry, through you. Just to that last one, I spoke to Art Woods as well, and he was quite supportive of maintaining the bridge. He used to live right beside the bridge and was, so maybe he's even watching tonight, but that was the conversation I had with him, that he wanted to see that bridge maintained. So I don't know. I don't know what to say about that, but that was my conversation with Mr. Woods.
Councilor McMillan?
Yeah, Mr. Woods also got a hold of me, and he said he wanted a bridge there, but he wanted it for the farming community and the Mennonite community to be able to use it. So I just wanted to add that. I think Mr. Woods is getting around here.
He, by the way, still has some property out there. If anybody knew that.
No, I didn't know.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, Clerk Hummel, you're saying if, would you repeat what you said about our decision making this evening?
So with the recorded vote, which has now been requested,
Okay.
I'll read the resolution, make sure everybody's clear on
Yeah.
what they're voting for, and then I'll call off the names and everybody votes yes or no.
So can Clerk Hummel read the resolution, then we can have final comment before the recorded vote? Is that okay? Or no? Well, okay, let's just start. Any more comments, and then Clerk Hummel will read the recommendation, and then we'll have the vote. Okay, seeing no further comments, Clerk Hummel will read the recommendation number A,
Yes.
and then we'll call for the vote.
Yes, I'm gonna read it just to make sure I am 100% solid on what wording you're going with. So in report IS 06 of 2021, the recommendation that you're voting on, that the Council of the Township of Woolwich, considering report IS 06-2021 respecting the Peel Street Bridge Municipal Class Environmental Assessment Project, directs staff to finalize the environmental assessment as a permanent closure. I'm understanding permanent closure stays in there, or pedestrian rehabilitation, and to issue the notice of study completion for the Peel Street Bridge Municipal Class Environmental Assessment Project, and file the environmental assessment project file report with the municipal clerk for a minimum 30-day public review period. Staff, everybody, that's what I believe the recommendation is, and there's hands up, I see.
Any comment about that? That's what we're gonna vote on?
Staff.
Councilor McMillan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Reddekopp. I just wanted to ask Chair double check that doesn't close the door on doing a new EA later. If 4 or 5 years down the road, we do get upper level funding to put in a traffic bridge, we would just have to kind of start over with a new EA at that point. Is that correct?
Sure. So through you, Chairman Redekop, just for clarity too, recommendation A is a one or, first off. So it's council deciding on the closure or pedestrian rehab so that we can at least have direction, but that does finish the EA. We would have complied with the EA and we are complete now, and we would then be able to post that notice of completion and have that out for public viewing for the 30-day period. So it is one or the other under A. To Councillor McMillan's question, and I don't know if he's having internet trouble, but was that you're on mute, Councillor McMillan? Sorry.
Yeah, I lost my internet. I apologize. I missed everything.
Okay. Just to repeat then, through you, Chairman Redekop, to Councillor McMillan, the recommendation A is a closure or rehab for pedestrian use. It is one or the other. So the recommendation is not containing both. It's one or the other that we're seeking that direction from council on if they choose A. And then we would have met our obligations, and then we can then put the notice of completion study for public viewing and comment for the 30-day required window. And then be done with that, and we have a direction. To your question, Councillor McMillan, regarding closing the door, if council elects option A, either the permanent closure or the pedestrian rehab, I guess where this boils down to is timing. And I guess that's where staff is going to struggle a little bit, and why we would look for something to move on. If the thinking is to wait until maybe we have upper government funding available at some point in the future, we would recommend the permanent closure would essentially keep it closed. We would do the turnarounds and then look for money, and then we would need to do either an amendment or a new EA if it was council's will then to replace the structure at that time. If it's pedestrian only, staff would be asking council, I guess, essentially for the green light to move in that direction as soon as possible, I think would be our hope. But appreciating council can say, no, we are going to do that. But we feel that it's not really safe for that purpose at this point, and it would need work to use it for pedestrian only, right? So I think there is a bit of a conundrum there, but you're right. We would just have to get into a new EA if it was to replace it for a future structure or to replace it for future vehicular use, albeit that is not staff's recommendation. I want to be clear about that. We're not recommending having this for vehicular use. Right.
And regardless, we have to put in the turnarounds right away. Regardless, that road has to end. If the bridge is going to be there and we're going to at a future date make it a pedestrian bridge, or we're going to take the bridge out, the road has to stop at the river and there has to be a turnaround.
Correct.
So if there's a turnaround there and the road stops and the bridge is still there, and staff says, we want to move on this, and council says, well, let's wait a couple of years because the community's being successful with some fundraising, then that's a decision we can make 6-8 months from now that is still in line with what we're doing here tonight if this motion passes.
Correct.
That's not what staff wants to hear. Staff wants a clear direction for the next 10 years. But that we do leave that door open, if I'm correct.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Tucker, did you have something to respond to?
No. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do we have a call for the vote?
I'll go through the names. So
Okay.
This is A with the words permanent closure removed. Is that correct, Jerry?
Right. It's either permanent closure or it's rehab with pedestrian. We would just remove the other one in the final recommendation on the 23rd.
So the mover and seconder, it's going to be A with pedestrian rehabilitation left in. Okay. So if you vote yes, you are voting in favor of that motion. If you vote no, you are voting against it. So I'm going to go, this is not in alphabetical order, it's a sorted order. So I'm going to start with Councillor Martin, yes or no?
No.
Councillor Shantz, yes or no?
No.
Mayor Shantz, yes or no?
I'm gonna make a quick comment before I vote, and that is, I think the bridge needs to be available for the farming community, and so I vote no.
Councillor Redekop, yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Merlehan, yes or no?
Yes.
And Councillor McMillan, yes or no?
Well, since it's defeated on a tie vote, I can't, my vote's inconsequential. I pass. No, I'll vote yes.
You could have voted no.
I could have, yes.
So where do we go from here?
So
Or is
that's
that
a
for-
decision.
That's for next meeting.
The recommendation would be,
You have to put something else on the floor.
Any, Councillor Merlehan, go ahead, and then, Mayor.
I'll move the other part of that recommendation, and we can stroke out pedestrian rehab and put permanent closure.
Seconder?
Sorry, just for clarity again, Councilor Merlehan is moving option A again, but without the pedestrian option, just the permanent closure. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And the seconder? Councillor McMillan?
You guys are killing me here. So this is that the Council of the Township of Woolwich, under report ISO 6 respecting Peel Street Bridge, A, direct staff to finalize the environmental assessment as a permanent closure, and to issue the notice of study completion for the Peel Street Bridge, and so on. Everybody okay with that? Okay, so I am going to go again. Councillor Martin,
no.
Councillor Shantz,
No.
Mayor Shantz,
No.
Councillor
Yes.
Merlehan,
Yes.
and Councillor McMillan.
Yes.
Motion failed. Why are you doing this to me?
Because we're conflicted.
Yes, you are.
We are very-
Very.
Councilor Redekop texted us and said he saw you sleeping earlier, so we want to make sure that's not happening.
Well, I'm wide awake now.
Could GIS help us here?
Yes, it could.
So what's,
Well, I'd move the recommendation with B.
okay, got the motion on the floor, by Councillor Martin to do B, which is, to proceed to phase 3 and 4, to remove and replace the bridge with a new structure, basically. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Shantz? Do we need any more discussion? Or we go to the recorded vote? Again, we're making you work.
I've never done 3 in one night. But
Oh,
Councillor
Councillor McMillan, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to say, like, I know it feels like we've gone over this 100 times and we've spent a ton of time on this, but this came to us for the first time in November. And I understand staff want a clear direction on this. But we're going to commit to, like Councillor Sean said, definitely $8 million here. But I mean, jokes aside, it's going to be, yeah, 10, inflation could be 20, who knows? Option A gives us time. It gives us a situation where we can continue to allow the residents to try to fundraise. It gives us an opportunity to lobby upper levels of government. If we do B, we're committing to call it $4 million tonight. And I know that it feels like we've beaten this horse dead, but this is the third time that it's come before us. We're going to spend $4 million. Like we've talked about it for, I don't know, an hour tonight. It was an hour the other time. I'm not saying that I'm against it. I'm not against spending $4 million to put in a traffic bridge there at all. But I would like to know, where's the money going to come from? And if it's going to come from upper tier government, or if it's going to come from us, are we increasing the infrastructure levy? I'm not against spending that money, but I would like to know where it's coming from. And the other option at least allows us time And this one, you know, kind of commits us to $4 million tonight.
Councilor Martin, and then Mayor Shantz.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think it's committing us to anything. Staff will go away and proceed with phase 3 and 4. They'll come back with different designs. And before we spend the money, we still have to approve the recommendation that'll be before us. So I don't think we're committing to anything. This just gives us an option of looking at different ideas.
Okay, Mayor Shantz.
I was basically going to say the same thing that Councilor Martin, that this is just to proceed with the study, and when it's done, we will have the information from this study. We will still have the information from the environmental assessment that's been done on the other one. And perhaps there'll be a different design that, I don't know, something different that satisfies all of us.
I have a question for Mr. Poupé. What is phase 3 and 4 looking for in the environmental assessment? Like, or Mr. Tucker.
Yeah, through you, Chair Redekop, I'll handle this for Jared. So phase 3 is simply looking at alternatives. So if council is directing us to proceed through that, we would look at new designs. You have to look at how they interact with like environmental features out there, archaeological, things like that. So we go through a myriad of different options: 1 lane, 2 lane, concrete, steel, heritage enhancements, things like that. And then phase 4 is that final recommendation to council.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tucker. Councilor Shantz?
I just wanted to add one thing, that if we go with options 3, we save $160,000, because if we go with option 1 or A, we have to spend $250 for the turnaround. If we go with option 3, we only have to spend $84 for the studies, and the turnaround doesn't get put in at this point.
Thank you. Call for the question.
Everybody ready?
Everyone ready?
So this is B as is. Clause B as is, no changes, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna flip it all around and go in a different order. I'm gonna start with Councilor Redekop, yes or no?
No.
Councilor McMillan, yes or no?
Yes.
Councilor Martin, yes or no?
Yes.
Mayor Shantz, yes or no?
Yes.
Councilor Martin, yes or no?
No.
And Councilor Shantz, yes or no?
Yes.
That's 4 in favor, that passes.
Well, thanks everyone for a very good discussion and for making clear work.
Sweating.
No, I really appreciate all your input, even though we were divided. I think it was very, very good discussion, and we'll go forward with number B. That gives staff some direction, which they have been looking for. So we go to number 8 in our agenda, unfinished business. We have none. Consent items, we have 1 item for approval and several items to be received for information. So the item for approval is the Hopewell Crossing half-load recommendation. Do I need a recommendation?
Just do them all.
I'll do all 3.
Approval and for information.
Okay. Would there anyone be willing to move the consent items? So Mayor Shantz, seconded by Councilor Martin. All those in favor? That's passed. Thank you. Carried. Number 10, staff reports and memos. Number 1, DS06-2021, proposed removal of holding provision 33 Front Street and Isabella Street, St. Jacobs. Mayor Shantz and Councilor Merlehan have declared a pecuniary interest, so they'll leave this portion of the meeting. This evening, we have Jeremy Vink again to provide council with an overview of his report. Mr. Vink, you may begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Councillor, and Councillors and Chair. This is just a removal of the holding provision. This applies to the Spruce Lawn apartment property on Front Street in Isabella in St. Jacobs. We approved the zoning back in 2018, but subject to holding provisions. The holding provisions dealt with addressing the record of site, ensuring that there is appropriate stormwater drainage option that has been basically finalized or addressed, and then the removal of the actual holding provision itself. So the record of site has been completed, the region is satisfied and has waived everything, and the stormwater management plan is being implemented and I think is almost done. It's bringing the stormwater out along Front Street. So staff is satisfied that the holding provision can be lifted, and then the applicant, Spruce Lawn Holdings, can then start moving forward to complete site plan, so they're hopefully project ready whenever funding may come up for them to do some works there. So staff recommends that the holding provision be lifted as per the recommendation.
So this was the construction that was done on Front Street in the fall, is that right?
Yes, so the construction that happened in the fall was to put the stormwater drainage out for Spruce Lawn Apartments.
Okay, are there any other questions for Mr. Vink, Councillor Shantz?
I'm just going to move the recommendation.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Councillor McMillan? All those in favor? Unanimous for the people here. Thank you very much. That's passed and that's carried. Sorry. Okay, Councillor Mayor Shantz can come back.
Here, yep, come on in.
And Councillor Merleham can come back now too. So no, I guess you have to stay away, Mr. Merleham. The next one also you declared pecuniary interest. Number 4, DS 11 2021 public washrooms in the village of St. Jacobs. We have Jenna Morris, the Economic Development and Tourism Officer. Ms. Morris, you may begin with your overview when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of council. Good evening. So tonight's report and requests therein aim to support the businesses in the village of St. Jacobs with a short-term solution to public washrooms. Although COVID continues to aggravate the issue, the lack of public washrooms available in downtown has existed for quite some time now. The village in downtown St. Jacobs is a huge attraction to visitors near and far, and as I outlined in the report, the village and businesses within have been awarded a number of recognitions for just that. The village is one of the township's anchor attractions, and the lack of public washrooms are apparent. To address the issue, the BIA have worked with staff on a solution for council's consideration before you this evening. The new facility would be located at 1430 King Street, or Block 3, where it is both street facing and ground level, and most importantly, open to the public. I'd like to note that the financial contribution would be paid through the Transient Accommodation Reserve Fund, or the Municipal Accommodation Tax, which started in 2019. There is sufficient balance available for projects like this one that support the tourism industry. With that, I will wrap up and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Morris on this public washroom issue in St. Jacobs? Councillor Shantz?
Thank you. Through you to Ms. Morris. Is there any permanent solution for this moving forward? I understand this is probably going to be just temporary. Is there a permanent solution that we can look at?
So, great question, and through you, Chairman Reddycop, to Councillor Shantz. There is a plan to develop a long-term solution, and there's a few considerations for a long-term solution, and we're hoping to bring a report to council later this year that will address a long-term solution for years beyond 2021.
Okay, so this would just be a stopgap until that happens.
Yeah.
I'm council's representative on the BIA in St. Jacobs. And so they asked the question about accessibility of this washroom, and it's really not. But Block 3 Brewing allows people with accessibility issues to come into their facility. So that was addressed in that way by the BIA. Any other comments or questions for Ms. Morris? Councillor Martin, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question. Can somebody tell me why we all of a sudden have a problem with washrooms in Jacobs? It's only a few years ago that we had twice as many visitors as we have now, and we never heard anything about problems with washrooms. I sort of got the feeling that we're using the COVID thing to get something that they want. I've always felt it's a BIA issue. And if their people don't want to open their washrooms to the public, then they should be paying to have other washrooms put in. I don't think it's a township responsibility, but can somebody tell me why all of a sudden we have a problem? Jenna?
Ms. Morris? Yeah.
Sure. Through you, Chairman Reddy Cop, I wasn't sure for sure who was going to jump in. But to you, Councillor Martin, as far as I understand, as this has been an ongoing issue prior to my time at the township, with the change of ownership from Mercedes Corp in the downtown and the sale of land to multiple different and new landowners, the interests are no longer aligned to support one cause or support one thing, being tourism. Before this, Mercedes Corp provided a public washroom that was available to visitors within the downtown, and that there is no longer a facility that provides for that. It is just up to the individual businesses. So with the transition and the sale of lands to individual business owners and the interests being very self-focused to those individual businesses, there's no longer a common place for visitors to use the washroom.
Councillor Martin?
Yeah, just a follow-up question then. So what happens to people that come to Elmira? Where do they go? Why is it just a problem in St. Jacobs? Or if they go to any other part in our community, what are they supposed to do then?
Another great question, and through you, Chair Reddy Cup, to Councillor Martin. There are a number of facilities for folks to use in the downtown Elmira, and it's downtown Elmira, downtown St. Jacobs are both draws of foot traffic. People are looking for a place to use the washroom upon their arrival. Again, that there no longer is that option in the village of St. Jacobs where there are in the downtown Elmira. There are a lot of draws for tourism and visitors to the village of St. Jacobs, which has increased foot traffic compared to other places within the municipality.
Mayor Shantz and then Councillor McMillan.
I would, suggest that people in Elmira have a couple of options for public access. One would be the administration building, and the other would be the WMC. I know they're not, well, the administration building is pretty much downtown. The WMC is not right downtown, but it is an option in the town where there is public access.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Chair. I think in Elmira too, we don't get as many tourists from far away. I think a lot of the people that are coming to the Elmira downtown are from Woolwich or Wellington County or Wellesley. We don't have as many people coming from the GTA. So people can hold it until they get home, I think, for the most part in Elmira.
You're there.
I'll buy that.
Any other comments?
Councilor Martin, I don't know that for sure. I just sitting on the BIA in Elmira, that it's never come up as, how do we allow our tourists to relieve themselves? Because it's not as many tourists from far away.
Okay, thank you. So, there's a recommendation, approve $10,000 financial contribution to St. Jacobs BIA, and it's funded, as Ms. Morris said, by taken from the transient accommodation tax, and we authorize the mayor and clerk by bylaw to enter into a nominal tri-party lease agreement with the BIA, Block 3 Brewing, so the BIA's liability will be adequately covered by the Township of Woolwich. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Shantz, and seconded by Mayor Shantz. Any other further questions? Councillor Martin?
Thank you. I just want to know how far or how long we're going to go with this. I mean, we made accommodation last fall till I believe October the 1st. And we said it was a one-time help you out. And now here we are and they're asking again. Are they going to ask next spring and the next spring? Or are we on the hook to build something worth, well, I saw a figure of $250,000. I would never support that unless there was, the BIA was part of it. So this is just it's just something I don't like about it. I mean, I know people that, need a place to go. I understand. But I'm on the road 2 days a week and for 12 hours a day, and I always seem to manage. So I don't know.
Okay, thanks for that comment. Jenna, I think you mentioned that there will be another recommendation of a more permanent solution later on in the year, and then we can discuss costs. Larry? Sorry, Councillor Sean, sorry.
Larry's okay. I think it's just another time when we just don't give enough credit to the Shantz family and the Mercedes group was what they've done for us over the past years. And it's kind of all got swept under the rug and nobody realized all what happened in the background. So I think we have to give that group credit for what they have given in the past. And now we're up against it because now they're not involved in it anymore. And now we have to provide some amenities that were given, on behalf of that group. So I think we got to give a shout out to the Mercedes group for that.
Councillor McMillan, you had a comment? No, okay. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The other thing I think council needs to be aware of is, I had a long conversation with the CEO for the Waterloo Region Tourism Marketing Corporation about our dilemma here in the use of municipal accommodation tax. Because one of the things we're supposed to be using the municipal accommodation tax funding for, is to support the continuation of visitors visiting our area, longer stays, etc. And we had a good discussion. And to Councillor Martin's concern, one of the things we sometimes have to look at is some moves that we do like this are important because if it's going to ensure that visitors return to our downtowns, i.e. in this particular case, it's an economic development move, whether you believe it or not, because we want to make sure that tourists have a good experience. And part of this is to make sure there's available facilities for people to use. Perhaps, ultimately it's about where people can go, to certainly change their kids' diapers, things of that nature. You have to be family friendly, kid friendly, that sort of thing. So I just wanted to add that conversation. I think it's pertinent to the discussion you're having. It's about the total package and experience that we want to be able to provide to the tourists that are visiting our area so they come back, spend more money, and in a way it's a form of business retention, to make sure businesses stay open and visitors come back.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
I understand all that.
Okay. All those in favor of the recommendation? That's passed. Thank you very much. And thank you, Ms. Morris, for your work on this through the BIA. I appreciate it very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Number 5, F04-2021, Ontario Regulation 284/09 Budget Exclusions 2021. We have the Treasurer and Director of Financial Services, Richard Petherick. You may begin with your overview when you're ready. Richard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So essentially, before Council can pass this year's budget, we need to have this recommendation passed. And what it does is it allows us to exclude certain expenses that I would call non-cash liabilities or non-cash expenses. And for us, that's being amortization and our future employee future benefit liability. And the reason for this is since these are non-cash items, if we were to include it into the budget, we would arbitrarily be inflating what I would say would be the tax levy component. So by excluding it, we're not causing that burden. But when we do our full reporting at the year end, we do include these costs, but we through this regulation don't have to include it in our budget. So I think that's all I probably want to add at this point in time. I'll take any questions council may have.
Any questions for Mr. Petherick? Councillor McMillan?
I'll just move the recommendation.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Shantz? All those in favor? Thank you, that's passed and carried. And number 6, Mr. Petherick's up again, but our F05 2021 budget approval.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So after the multiple nights this year that we had talking about the draft 2021 budget, both the operating capital and the water and wastewater through the month of January, we're now finally here seeking council's approval of the to make this the final 2021 operating capital water and wastewater budgets. So just really from a high level perspective, the operating and capital budgets, they right now contain a 1.92% overall tax levy increase. That can be broken into 1.42% for the base, and 0.5% was added for what was called a COVID-19 relief fund. From the water and wastewater, that's our user rate budgets. Both of those contain a 0% increase. I don't want to really go over some of the changes that were made. They're all contained within the report, but be happy to take any questions council may have.
Councillor Merlihan?
Yeah, thank you. Through you for Chair Redicop to Mr. Patrick. Have you had any time to think about what this 0.5 COVID relief levy would be used for? I was chairing the meeting when this came up. I can't get my head around what it's for, and then the option that just if we don't use it, it would just get put back into reserve funds. Does staff have any more direction on what they anticipate that money could be used for, or is this going to be a council play as you go kind of thing that we throw money at different things related to COVID?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. So at this moment in time, staff do not have any concrete plans for this. I believe what the whole purpose of the fund was just to have money so that council can direct funds to certain COVID-19 relief initiatives. I think one of the things that we were looking at, and I think that was through Mayor Shantz, was looking at some of our community groups and community organizations to see if we can partner with them to be able to provide relief to those in most need. But at this stage of the game, I think this is more in council's realm, and they can decide what they would like to do with it. But I think this pandemic is not over quite yet, unfortunately, and we don't know what the needs of some of our residents are going to be going forward. And at least this fund provides council with the option to do something in the future if they so choose to.
Okay, and just as a follow-up to that, I believe under Mr. Brenneman's budget, he had money that was from the province to deal with COVID-related expenses and such. I'm just wondering, could you remind me how much is in that and whether or not some of that money could be used as some sort of COVID relief?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. So we have $50,000 in the budget, and that is related for us to have funding for our direct COVID-related expenses. So that would be us having expenditures related to masks, related to any additional PPEs that we need for the pandemic response from our municipality. Stuff like that. That's what that fund is for. Because we know, as I said, we're still in the middle of the pandemic. There's still PPE, there's still some hand sanitizing, some other things that are still needed. And this fund is going to be, that we're receiving through the Safe Restart Agreement, it's going to allow us to put some of that money towards those expenses. But I don't believe it can be used for any community initiatives that this 0.5% has been added to the budget.
Okay, thanks. Could I just have a question through you, Fred, to Councillor McMillan? Just, I'm wondering if he could share his vision for what you were thinking of how we would dole out that money, or what in particular you were thinking when you proposed this.
Yeah, my only thought was through you, Chair, if I'm allowed. I guess I wasn't called there. Thank you. Last year we forgave property tax and didn't charge a penalty on property tax for a set amount of time, and that ended up we lost 117,000 in revenue, or 111,000, 117, and it was normally 79,000 that we take in over that time frame. So out of the 117 that we forgave in late fees and penalties, the normal was 79, so there was like $30,000 extra. So my thought was, if we're going to do that again, let's be prepared. Let's put something in the cookie jar so that if we do make that decision again, we've got some funding in place to make that happen. And then we also we lowered ice rental fees by 50% in December, I think that was, maybe January. So if we're going to do things like that, then let's be prepared. That was my thinking. Those were the two things that we did that made me think maybe we should get ready for this year.
Okay, can I just follow up with that? Through you, Chair Redekop, to Councillor McMillan. How do you propose, like the public, if they know we have $56,000 available, like is that something like they would come and apply, or would we only be doing it through community groups? Or I'm just trying to think of logistics of, when that would be an appropriate expense or not.
Thank you, Chair. I think the way that we did it the first round, because we had two separate segments last year where we forgave late payments on property tax, and the first one was a blanket. Everybody got it, and that's where we ended up losing revenue that we would have otherwise had. The second time we did it, we said, okay, people have to apply, and it has to be people that are clearly being hurt by COVID. So you couldn't be 3 years in arrears and then all of a sudden lose the penalty fee. So I think having that application process was a good idea. I didn't flesh through every possible opportunity we might have to help the community. I just thought, the ice rental, cutting the ice rental charge in half that's another one where, we did that. That's another example of where this money could come in handy if we decided to do that again. So I didn't flush it out outside of those two things. I thought that, it was just better to be prepared if council decided that we did want to do something again.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you for that discussion. Councillor Shantz, anything on the budget?
Yeah, thank you. Through you to, I guess, just staff in general. I was the one that questioned the GIS position and bringing that on instead of bringing somebody from the outside in at a $30,000 amount. So I just wanted to thank Mr. Vink for his presentation. I think that helped quite a bit understanding what that program actually will do and what that position might entail. So, and then I guess the other thing I somewhere along the line, I missed the fact that it was a 2-year contract, which I'm in agreement with as well. So I'm just wanting to say that I'm okay with that position now.
Thank you, Larry. Any other questions about the budget? Councillor Martin?
Thank you. To follow up what Councillor Shantz said, are we leaving ourselves at risk on a 2-year contract? My fear is that if we get somebody and they're with us a year and can get a job, full-time job, we're going to lose them. So I think there's some risk there, which bothers me. I think I would sooner say that if it's a 2-year contract, halfway through the contract, we look at it and then decide whether we just go for another year or we make it a full-time position. I'll just throw that out there. the other comment I had going back to Councillor Merlehan, if he was suggesting that we take the COVID relief funds out of the budget, I would support him on that.
Mr. Pomponi, were you going to respond to Councillor Martin's question or comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd say that is a risk when you certainly are looking at recruiting any staff for any position. Contracts are being measured against permanent positions, so there's always that level of competition for sure. If you want to get somebody who has the experience, they wouldn't be giving up a contract position or a permanent position to go to a contract position. So I think that it would limit our recruitment to some extent for sure. It has that potential for sure.
Thank you. Do I have a mover of the budget? Sorry, go ahead, Mayor Shantz. Go ahead, sorry.
Thanks. Just a couple of things. I don't have a problem reviewing the position in a year. I think that's a good idea and see where we stand on it. I do have a question for Mr. Petherick. Can you remind me where our operating reserves are?
Our operating contingency reserve?
Yeah.
Yeah, so right now, I think we would be looking at probably at the end of 2021, about $215,000 is probably what's going to be left in the operating contingency. There are a number of things that are going to be coming out of that area this year. We built up some money. We set money aside for the resurfacing, the transitioning between gravel roads to the surface street roads. We have some money in there for that. Plus, we also have money that's coming out for the termite. So I think at the end of the day, we're going to be about $250,000 in that reserve at the end of the year.
That's a pretty low balance for an operating reserve with the budget that we have. So I certainly support the 0.5% to support whatever COVID contingencies come up. And if we get lucky and we don't have any, that will be money that will help to start to bring that contingency reserve back.
Thank you for that comment. Councillor Merlehan?
Yeah, through you, Chair Redekop, just general comments, I guess, about the budget. I understand this was a rough year to plan for because of how many unknowns there are. I got to say there wasn't a lot to dig into on this particular budget. Back in August, when you came to council and asked where we wanted to be, some of the stuff I had brought up as a request was, pausing the green levy for a year and pausing the infrastructure levy for a year, which happened. I also asked that we pause on the going forward on the org review and of hiring people. If kind of in my opinion, if the GIS position is as important as it's been presented to us, then I would suggest that staff would find another position that's not as important as the GIS and choose. And I know I'm going to be in the minority here, but this is a year. Last year in August, you couldn't have predicted what's going to happen this year. We still can't predict what's going to happen this year in 2021. And everything in me tells me that we shouldn't be spending willy-nilly, especially on staffing positions at this time. And when it comes to the GIS position, it's not me being cheap or stingy or anything like that. We are spending a boatload of cash in GIS in that area this year to get us up to snuff. and to move forward maybe in another year. So that was a request that I made in August about pressing the pause button on staffing. And I also understand through the budget process that there will be more staffing requests being made of us in the coming months. And those are staffing requests that, you know, a number of us had been anticipating for years now for the boots on the ground type of staff. So, you know, the GIS position, if you look at it alone just by itself, you know, sure, but when you look at it overall, what we're going to be looking at for 2021, when we have no idea how things are going to roll out, and I don't want to be doom and gloom about where we are with the pandemic, but the vaccines aren't rolling out very quickly, and you know, there are different threats that have come along with the virus that you know, potentially could make it more dangerous because people are at the end of the rope right now as far as dealing with it, and who knows what's happening. So I really wish that that staff would have pressed pause this year on more staffing requests. When it comes to the COVID levy that Councillor McMillan brought up, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I'm just trying to understand how we administer that. When we looked at the other non-targeted way, I suppose, you know, people did get a benefit that maybe they didn't need or weren't entitled to, but at the time it was something you could do quickly to help people that did need it. So I'm interested to see where that goes at the end of the year if it goes into reserves. I just find it a little interesting that we're concerned about our reserves, but you know, when it came to the termite problem, we went immediately to the reserves and took the money out of there just so it wouldn't affect the levy. I guess if it was between the two, I might, you know, want to go and just put the termite program on the levy and bypass the COVID relief, and maybe we come up with something else. I still don't kind of get it, but I'm not entirely opposed to it either, because there will be people that probably will need it. So at the end of the day, with the staffing and everything, I'm not going to support the budget this year. Just pretty much based on that, unless staff came and found other positions that weren't as important as the GIS. But otherwise, that's all I got.
Thank you. Sorry, Mayor Shantz.
Thank you. I'd like to say thank you to staff for working so diligently on the budget and for being careful in how they spend our funding. Councillor Merlihan, we can remove the GIS position and it will not affect the levy. The GIS position, as I understand it, is coming from the development area, and so it's being funded by growth and by development. Mr. Petherick, is that correct?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, yes, that is correct. So it's being funded from the development engineering and the building department. The uniqueness of it, though, with it being in the building department, there is this indirect benefit. So if we remove the position, it would actually cause a 0.8% increase to the tax levy is what it would do, oddly enough.
That is interesting. So again, thank you very much to staff for working very hard to keep our levy in check. We still have the lowest taxation of anyone in the region. I don't know if that's something to be proud of. I'm not sure it is in and of itself. I think we're a growing community, and we need to support that. And I'm happy to see that we can support some of our growth by growth and by development. So thanks again to staff.
Thank you for those comments. Do I have a mover for the budget approval of 2021? Councillor Martin, seconded by Mayor Shantz. Any other comments, questions? All those in favor? All those opposed? That's carried. Other business, number 11 on your program. Is there any other business that you wish to discuss? Councillor McMillan?
Sorry, Chair, I thought I heard you say number 11. Are you on number 9?
Oh, sorry.
I got a couple for number 11 and when you get there.
Okay. Oh, yeah, other business, right? Sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor McMillan. Other
Okay,
business?
so yeah, on correspondence, number 11, 11.2 and 11.3. The City of Waterloo's got a couple of interesting resolutions that they passed. The one is a request to the province to allow municipalities to do inclusionary zoning for affordable housing. We don't need to get into all of that, whether we would want to do inclusionary zoning or affordable housing, but I would move that we would pass a similar motion to the City of Waterloo in 11.3, just requesting to the province that municipalities be allowed to do it. And whether or not we did do it, you know, we could debate that in a future date, but just requesting to the province that municipalities be allowed. The other one, 11.2, it's talking about upstream funding instead of policing. And I think the City of Waterloo and the Township of Woolwich are dramatically different in what their needs are. And so I'm not going to ask that we write or endorse a similar motion, but I would be interested to hear if council would be interested in having a discussion, maybe an agenda item where we could talk about a similar idea where you know, we're investing in mental health, we're investing in community supports rather than policing. And I think what we would spend it in and where that money could be directed would be different than the City of Waterloo. So I think we need a Woolwich approach to that. So those are the two. 11.3 that we move a similar motion, and 11.2 just if council maybe would have that as an agenda item in the future if people would want that.
Number 3, City of Waterloo Council resolution on inclusionary zoning and affordable housing. Val, do we need a motion?
A seconder first.
Councilor McMillan moves it. Mayor Shantz seconds it. Any other further discussion? All those in favor? Okay, that's passed. And would council be open to having discussion on the second item under correspondence? We don't need a motion. We
Just do a thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Okay, yeah. So we'll put that on the agenda. Okay.
Councilor Redicott, can you just make sure other business is done and
Oh, yeah.
outstanding activity?
Yeah. Any other business? Sorry, I got ahead of myself. Nope. Outstanding activity list as of Friday, February 5th, 21. Any discussion on that? Councilor Martin?
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to add one. Whatever I want to call it, it's getting late. The region is doing a study on the intersection at Northfield Drive and Sawmill, illumination. There's not enough proper street lights. There's a very dark intersection, and they're going to hire a consultant to look at it. So I would like to see that put on our outstanding activity list so we don't lose track of it.
Okay. Do we need a motion?
No, we'll add it.
Okay. Thanks for raising that, Councilor Martin. Okay, any other thing about the outstanding activity list? Seeing none, then we'll go to number 14, public notice, none. Notice of closed meetings, none. Notice of motion, none. Adjournment, this meeting, motion that this meeting be adjourned. Mayor Shantz. Seconded by Councillor Shantz. All those in favor? Okay. We have to
To
stay.
do,
Yeah, we'll have a council meeting after.
okay, so I think we can go right into the council meeting.
Okay.
Are there any, just a minute, let me make my screen a little bigger here so I can see everybody. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, motion that council convenes into committee of the whole, moved by Councillor McMillan, seconded by Councillor Redekop. All those in favor? That's carried. Motion that the following bylaws be introduced and read a first and second time. There is a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement with G. Douglas Valley Inc. for architect design services for the Maryhill Fire Station, and a bylaw to confirm the actions and proceedings of council of February 9th. Moved by Councillor Sean, second by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That's carried. A motion that committee of the whole rise and report to council. Moved by Councillor Martin, second by Councillor McMillan. All those in favor? Carried. Motion that council confirms and adopts the proceedings of the committee of the whole. Moved by Councillor Redekop, seconded by Councillor Shantz. All those in favor? That's carried. Motion that the following bylaws in the hands of the clerk be read a third time and that finally passed, and that they be numbered as bylaws number 08-2021 to 09-2021, and that they be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with a corporate seal. Moved by Councillor Shantz, seconded by Councillor Redekop. All those in favor? That is carried. A motion that we adjourn to be again in regular session on Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021. Councillor McMillan, Councillor Martin, all those in favor? That's carried. Just hang on while we sign off. Thank you to everyone who participated tonight, and look forward to seeing you on February 23rd as you join our live stream again.